Hello, everyone. Welcome to Weekly Manga Recap. It is November the 20th, 2024. And how are we all doing today?
Doing good, Nick. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. I did a thing last night where I went to bed. So, amazing what a difference that makes.
Guys, these are the tips your adults, like your elders, they didn't teach us, you know? Like when we were young millennials, they didn't tell us like you got to go to bed sometimes. They were just like stay up, do whatever. Like we're remnants of the 80s. Like have you tried cocaine yet? And we had to be like, "No, we're not going to do cocaine, but also we won't go to bed." And that's a lesson we've all had to learn as we get older. So, I say this to the audience of fellow millennials that I believe we almost exclusively have. We have like 2 Gen Z listeners. And to those people, get some rest. And perhaps a reminder to all of us, we got to get some rest.
Good luck on your thing that you do. I don't know, your Fortnite? Is that it? Am I right about that? I don't know.
I mean,
you're on a manga podcast though, so you're in good company.
Yeah, you're not wrong when you say Fortnite. I do believe it still exists and is still considered popular.
Considered popular?
Look, I have no idea. That has never been my genre. I never feel like I can speak with... Like, I know I still hear about it. If it's still considered the big deal it once was, I have no idea. Because like,
it certainly still has enough tie-ins.
So. Yeah, like how would I even gauge that metric? I'm like, I'm not looking at these numbers. I don't care. Like someone could hand me like the numbers like month to month of Fortnite's players, and I'd be like, this is worthless. Why did you hand this to me? Like what could I possibly get out of this?
I saw an ad the other day that was for this thing, and I was looking, I was like, oh, it's a Ninja Turtles thing. And there's, Ninja Turtles fighting against, Foot Clan and stuff. And then I see like characters that are clearly like not Ninja Turtles running around too. I'm like, oh, is this like some sort of like weird like open world thing associated with TMNT or something? And I saw, I was like, oh, it's a Fortnite tie-in. And my heart sank, just plummeted into the depths of my stomach. I was like, oh,
it happens.
It's not an actual game. It's just a tie-in package.
There was a similar thing. There was like a Street Fighter 6 crossover with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they just made costumes you could wear in the overworld that look like the turtles, and I was like, fuck off. Like, I'm not giving you money for that. Like, put them in the game. They did it before. You could do it again.
Just at least have them show up like in, what was it? Which one do they show up in? Mortal Kombat.
They showed up in Injustice 2.
Injustice, yeah. Right? Because they had all sorts of like bonus fighters in that.
So. There's only so deep into the DC catalog you can go with characters as well before you are starting to scrape the like barrel of like, guys, it's fucking Polka Dot Man. Like, he's here. Like, we made it.
I don't know. I feel like you could have exclusively characters who have had their own independent series, and you could still have a long list of characters to put in those games.
That is true. They could put more people in. I think there is also a heavy desire from NetherRealm to put in a lot of guest characters. Like, I guess that there must be some market research that says like, yeah, people really like this or whatever. So,
guys, we have a lot of manga to talk about today, so I'm going to just like hard cut this tangent off right here.
I could go longer.
We'll go back to it. I guarantee you. We can't stay away from these. But on top of having a bunch of series to talk about this week, we also have a series that we took as a recommendation.
Yes.
Very different from, I think, anything we've covered this year, at least. Called Kowloon Generic Romance.
I have to really stop. This year, as I'm thinking about it, is a gigantic blur.
Yeah.
And I really will need to, like, at the end of the year, look up everything we read and be like, Oh, right. Like, I really had to sit there. I was like, what was our last recommendation? I was like, Halloween month. Quinn, this was not that long ago. It's been like 3 weeks.
This is a story. It's a series that's been running since 2019 by Jun Mayuzaki in Weekly Young Jump, which is essentially like the seinen uh, equivalent of Weekly Shonen Jump. They're both owned by Shueisha, and uh, it's about a romance story that takes place in the city of Kowloon, which is something that I had heard about very vaguely at certain points, but I didn't really know anything about it until someone very kindly advised us to
Yes.
maybe look it up.
It was Mandela in our Discord was like, if they don't know about us, our host should know what Kowloon is before they read this. And I am glad to know that because I was like, I'm sure I have heard of this, but this was destroyed, I believe, in real life before I was like really cognizant.
Yes. In 1994 was around the time that I was when it happened, I believe.
Okay.
And for those of you who, like me, like us, were not aware of what this was, it was this walled city in China that essentially there was no overarching governing body of. So a bunch of people just went there to live without government supervision and developed their own kind of anarchic community. And there were a ton of people living in it.
Yeah, you gotta like really stress. Not only was this like a walled city, it was like a hyper compact, dense city where it was just like building next to building next to building to the point where, from what I understand, there were like places through in the city where like you just couldn't see at points. Like it would be very dark because there was just no natural light could get in at certain points of the day, you know, depending where the sun is. So a very, very populated city. But yes, as you mentioned, seemed to operate on its own government. So it was, I guess, a great haven for a lot of crime and criminals and stuff like that.
Right. And until eventually, China was like, well, we can't have this.
They're like, well, hold on a moment. This is like kind of quirky, but not good for us, actually.
So there was a very long process of getting everyone out of there, and then it was demolished. So Kowloon Generic Romance takes place in essentially Kowloon 2, a city that was built inspired by the original Kowloon, but the deeper you read into the story, the more asterisks appear in that description. This is a very strange series because it starts off seeming like, oh, it's just in like, a modern or slightly futuristic version of Kowloon, but it's a very like low stakes story about this guy and girl who work together and clearly have a thing for each other. And the title of the story is Kowloon Generic Romance. So clearly this is going to be some kind of, long, slow burn love story between them. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that is definitely like the human element of the story.
Yes.
Is just seeing like what's going to happen between these two. Our characters are Reiko and Kudo. Reiko Kujirai is her full name, and she gets called like a couple of different. She gets called by both names by different people, and she is in love with her coworker. They're both in like their early 30s and stuff, and they hang out a lot. And
much like us, Nick.
Yeah. So, and you can tell it's a seinen because they smoke all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of smoking
in this series.
It's weird because this series has you nostalgic for things that you never experienced. Like, I don't know about you, Nick. This wasn't similar to my life, but for some reason I do still feel some nostalgia going through it. And smoking was one of those things I was like, no one around me just smokes anymore. That's crazy. It's good, probably, for their health and for mine. But it was something I was like, I miss having somebody around who would just light up a cigarette and look cool. How far are we into the episode, by the way? Did YouTube just block us for being like...
Stop that.
Yeah. They're like, stop advertising cigarettes, you weirdo. I'm like, I'm not advertising. I'm just saying I miss them.
this manga is obsessed with the idea of smoking while you eat watermelon. Like it's just a constant refrain of like, oh, it's so good to eat watermelon and smoke. It's so good.
I legitimately
All the time.
like, I might need to get a watermelon and a pack of cigarettes. Like, I think I might need to check this out. I haven't, thankfully, because I was like, why don't I just get high and eat watermelon? That sounds like a better plan. Yeah, and I think that's probably what she's going for.
The weird thing that happens about starting about 15 or so chapters in to the story is there starts to be this sense that something is off.
Yes.
Partially because of the hot new clinic that is in town, the age-defying clinic run by this very charismatic young plastic surgeon guy. Kawashita Group, I think I'm struggling.
All I remember is Hebimaru, I think, or
Hebimaru
is the main guy from it.
Hebi means snake. He's got a snake tattoo. Dumb snake tattoo.
And a snake tongue. Whoa.
Oh, his forked tongue, because he's a snake guy. Oh, and there's Garden of Eden symbolism.
I feel like
he's a snake guy.
I feel like we need to pull back a second, actually, because the start of this...
I struggled to present... I knew I was going to struggle to present a coherent vision of this story.
Because the start of the story is just a sort of, like, forlorn romance between Reiko and Kudo that it seems like Reiko really, really wants Kaido to like her, and she gets these like brief moments of flirtation before he'll very quickly become cold, and like he becomes this person you're like, girl, this guy is not good enough for you. Until you start to find out information, you're like, girl, I don't know if you're good enough for him. Like, I'm starting to reconsider some things. It becomes this very complicated web, as eventually it's revealed that's like, we don't know how yet, but this is not the same Reiko that has always existed.
It starts off with that, and then the longer you go into the story, the more things are not as they seem the story becomes.
It's weird because you are meant to always know there is some level of supernatural or sci-fi elements to this series, because there's like a floating what's an 8-sided dice called, like a octahedron. There's like some kind of floating octahedron in the sky that like characters will occasionally like allude to. They're like, our genetic disc, yeah, they're like, look at it, it's beautiful. And then they go about their day, and you're caught up in the human element of it. But you do every so often, like a chapter will ominously end staring at this like glowing cube, and you're like, there's some shit going on with that. But if you're hoping to get like quick information about that, I don't think you're gonna be in for a great place. I want to kind of state early on a little bit of my experience with the series, which is that I got about 30 chapters in, and I was enjoying myself. I have notes about things that I really, really enjoyed that I want to talk about. But around 30 chapters in, I kind of recognized, like, oh, so this is like an ongoing series that isn't being officially translated. So this is, when somebody picks it up and, like, isn't caught up in even an English release. And I'm like, I'm never going to get like the full story of actually what's going on here if I keep like reading this all the way. And I kind of got the vibe that I was like, I feel like if I keep reading, I'm going to get entrenched in this thing that's just not going to be fun to consume in this manner. Like, it's fun right now, but I feel like I will eventually reach a point where I'm like, this is starting to get annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I could kind of confirm that, because I got further than you did. Sure. I got around like 60 chapters in. And there are definitely revelations that happen.
Sure.
And I will say that although gradually the story kind of stops just presenting itself as like, oh, it's a nostalgic romance. That's kind of like the tagline early on. Because there is definitely like this idea of nostalgia, because, this is a series that is set in like a modern version of something that no longer exists, that is from people's kind of collective consciousness if they were, around, cognizant around the time that this would have been happening.
Also, I imagine more significant on the other side of the hemisphere as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you probably heard more about Kowloon living on that side of things.
And also like the art style, it feels like a lot of
Yeah.
characters are drawn like they're like this is more like an 80s series than a series that started only about 5 years ago. So there is that kind of feel of like, oh, this is like a harkening back to a previous era, and there are a lot of very deliberate discussions of nostalgia in this story. The idea that Kowloon is this nostalgic place, it makes you feel this kind of love for something in your past that you have this attachment to. And that starts off just kind of being like used in a romantic sense and gradually becomes a much more sci-fi philosophical thing about what the significance of human attachment to things is.
Yes.
And memories is. And as you go forward, you learn like, okay, well, it turns out that this character is not who they appear to be, and that's because of this. And whenever you get a revelation like that, a lot of the time it just happens.
I was gonna say
the characters just say, this is the thing that's happening.
There is a moment that like blew my mind at how casually it was just brought up in the story. And I guess spoilers at this point for a couple things. I guess we technically spoiled a couple things, but at some point you also have to like read the series. So if this does sound super interesting, then I maybe would go check that out before you listen forward, because I think we will probably spoil stuff. But one moment in particular that blew my mind is at this point, we know that there is something with Reiko that whether she had like amnesia or she's been like memory wiped, or if she is like a clone of her that like exists but doesn't have her memories or something like that. There is something going on with her and we don't know what exactly. And it starts to get broached at this idea that there are clones in this world. Because I was just immediately going to like, oh, this is some amnesia. This is some like eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
That was my original thought first.
She erased something. But someone says a line where they're like, oh, she has a mole under her eye. Like, the clones can't duplicate the mole. And I'm like, oh, okay, so clones exist in this world. And like, that's a decent enough, like that is considered a big revelation. Then there's like casually a line later where somebody is like, Kudo? Oh, that guy's probably a clone. And I'm like, wait, what? I was like, excuse me? Like, wait, is everyone in this town like a clone? And it's just like, it is not the like reveal you were supposed to get out of that moment. So they do not dwell on it.
There is an odd thing because this is a series that's been running for 10 volumes now. And I mean, and obviously there are like a bunch that like have not been collected yet. And I have to wonder if it's gone further with some of the ideas that have been presented in the beginning stages only from where I got to. Because only a few chapters ago from where I'm at, they actually reveal what the source of everything is. And they started getting into more kind of like harder sci-fi, not harder sci-fi stuff, but more actually establishing the rules, or at least ideas of what the rules are in terms of how stuff happens. And a lot of sci-fi stories that I see start off with that,
yeah,
and then use them. And this is a story that took, like when you consider it, over a year to explain what is happening. And when it happens, it doesn't feel like it was something that was really built up with a lot of tension to. The reveal when it happens is a very striking visual, and when it's explained, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then there are certain things that you see did foreshadow it when they're called back to.
Sure.
But it doesn't feel as if the story is leading up to that moment when the reveal happens. And it's kind of off-putting. And I am trying to at this point determine, because I thought around halfway through my reading experience, okay, this is like a sci-fi set story,
Sure.
but it sort of feels like, we're following like these two like ordinary people as they go about stuff, and there's just kind of like, a sci-fi setting around them.
Yeah.
That's an interesting outlook, to have, like, oh, it's these people and it's just this very human story surrounded by a very alien
Yeah, like
context. You could do something
what
like
if
that.
even in a crazy world like this, you could just have a beautiful romance, you know?
Right. And then it gets more and more into, is Kujirai a clone? Is, what is with the, the city of Kowloon? Are all these other people clones? What does that creepy guy with the forked tongue want? And it's much more into this sci-fi realm where like something is going on,
Yes.
but then the focus is also still very much on like Kujirai and Kudo, and if they're going to get together or not. And that's not to say that I found any of it bad. It's just off-putting, and it's
It's
hard to roll with.
it is very strange because one of the things you'll see when you're reading this series is like on a title page, it'll specifically label this as a dystopian romance story, but it doesn't feel very dystopian as you read it. Like, Kowloon is not drawn to be depressing or horrid as a place to live. Everyone seems to be having a great time. Like, people seem to be enjoying their jobs and are like working to get people in better places. They do allude to the idea that there is crime in like unsafe areas of Kowloon, but they're like, you don't go there. We're seeing our characters go to restaurants together and like, shop together, or they meet some of their various tenants or whatever that they help work with, and they have wacky adventures with them. And you're like,
Kujirai and Kudo are realtors.
yes,
And so something comes up occasionally where they just help someone find a new place to live.
exactly.
And it's never as if it's like, oh, the place that I was staying at, fell into, decay, and like
The roof
all the
collapsed
crimes
in on
happening
top
there.
of me. Like,
This place is not collapsing. There is not seemingly exploitation, happening for a bunch of people. The most sinister thing that's going on, seemingly, is that the Heavy Numa group,
yes.
this medical group, has moved in, and so there's some sense of distrust over whether or not what they're
Outside
doing is
forces,
good,
yeah.
what they should be doing, but they are very much an outside force coming into the city. So it's not like the city of Kowloon is itself, in any way bad.
Yeah. There's also because I mentioned before how like the real life Kowloon had like really dark elements to it because like the buildings were just so big and like crammed together that light couldn't really get in. Like, that's not the case at all in this series. Like, everything is extremely well lit. Like, there's a scene where they do like have to walk through a hallway where there should be no light in there, but they don't make you ever feel claustrophobic because that would be like antithetical, I presume, to the romance they're trying to get you to feel more of. So it seems like it's a pretty cool place, but like it does create this weird disconnect when you're reading like a dystopian love story and you're like, dystopia's not so bad. Like, if this was the option, I might pick this one. But that said, like, you do realize more stuff is going to happen. But again, I was like 30 chapters in and they were only starting to flirt with the idea. And I think the bigger reason that I eventually kind of found myself being like, I'm ready to kind of check out of this is Hebi Numu when he shows up.
Yeah.
At first, there is like a pretty clear through line in this series. It's like, hey, it is about Reiko and Kudo and their romance together. And that's what we're following. And then you start to realize there is something up with Reiko and we need to find out that. Like, what's going on. Then Hebi Numo shoes Hebi
Just call him Miyuki.
Yuki. Yeah.
Miyuki.
He shows up. Heavy guy. He shows up.
Heavy guy.
And he's like, hey, I'm just like this I'm this mischievous little guy, and who knows what I want, and like I clearly know more than you do. And you're like, oh, okay, so this guy's gonna be like an antagonist to deal with. And he is, but then he also just kind of has a lot of let's call them fling shenanigans with a friend of his. And I'm like, is this also part of the romance of this series? Like, is this just essentially like another couple for us to follow? Like, it was very surprising to me because I was just like, oh, like I thought this was like the serious story to undercut the rest of like the romance stuff. And you're like, nah, dog, it's another romance. We thought you would enjoy another one. And I was like, oh, okay. No, thank you, please. This one's awful, but I'll take the other one. The other one I really like.
It's very strange when Miyuki shows up because he is very deliberately like uber creeper.
Yes.
Early on, he has this like weird obsession with Kujirai, and you don't know why at first, and when you learn why, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. He finds her existence fascinating, essentially. But he's doing stuff where, like, you know, his clinic has like offered a few brochures, a few vouchers to people for like a free checkup of some kind. And Kujirai is like, oh, I want to, like, you know, kind of like do something about like the lines under my eyes, which is kind of a thing that's brought up, is, you know, laugh lines and crow's feet, which are, there's a thing about them because those are things that happen because of
they tell a
your
story
face over time.
Yes.
But as he puts it, those are wrinkles that exist without you actually having any experiences, which she doesn't understand, and you don't either until much, much later.
Yes.
But he's like, you know, like creeping on her and is like, oh, don't you want to do something with me? And she, to her credit, just to be like, leaving, storms out.
Yeah.
Then he shows up at the real estate agency, has a meeting with Kudo and Kujirai, and Kujirai does not like act aggressively towards him for whatever reason. She's just kind of like going along with things.
She's like, I get it. Like, she's like, I'm not trying to lose my job here because this guy is like considered already a hero in town. Like,
yes,
she is her friend Yome mentions to her specifically before she sees this guy, she's like, are you not going to wear any makeup? Like, that would be considered an insult to this guy to not at least try to look like you're trying to dress up for him. So, like, there's definitely a tone that's like, this guy is a level above us.
Right.
So I can see why she's not openly being like, yo, this guy is like a very strange person. He licked my lipstick off of me. I don't know what to tell you.
Kudo realizes that, like, Miyuki is creeping on Kujirai and gets aggressive towards him during the meeting. And so when he leaves, Miyuki just for the sake of it, leans in and kisses Kujirai against her will. So it's like, all right, this guy's very creepy. And so originally I thought, all right, this guy is the evil guy for Kudo to get the kick in the pants so that he'll actually ask out Kujirai. Mm-hmm. No, because as it turns out, Miyuki is very gay.
Yes.
And did that basically to be a weirdo and also to stir some shit up.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's just a little shit stirrer. Like, that was the vibe I was starting to get, was like, oh, this is just like a fruit basket antagonist. Like, somebody's here is like,
yeah.
I would like to mess with what you have as a good thing. Like, all right, dog, I guess. You seem to be devoting a lot of time to this.
In addition to this, he has this guy that he has hired to do some like investigation and stuff that he is also sleeping with, is his lover. Uh-huh. And so, okay, so they're you know, a couple, very not great couple, because Miyuki just like needs to like do a lot of work on himself, basically.
Yeah.
And also he needs to get rid of that tattoo. That tattoo is stupid. Like, all right, I get it. Your name is Heavy Numa, and you've got a snake tongue, and you're part of the snake group. And so you've got a snake that's coiled around your body. Why is it going across your butt?
I was going to say, man.
Why is it going across?
Don't
do that.
Somebody was losing their mind when they're like, should we tattoo the inside of his butt cheek? Like, we don't, like a little bit into it, because we don't want there to be a gap. When the butt cheek's there, you need to understand this is one solid snake. So, just for perspective's sake, I think we need to, spread the cheeks a little bit.
No, Just go straight across there. Act like it's just a flat surface. It's fine.
It's wild. It is an absolutely egregious tattoo, which again, no forewarning. It's not like an end of the chapter reveal. You just turn a page, you're like, all right, I guess Miyuki has a fucking like 8-foot long fucking snake tattoo across his back and butt for some reason.
And then it turns out, well, he's not really the antagonist. He's just got a B plot to this whole story, which he's just the protagonist of this other side story thing, and it's about him struggling to have a identity in this world that's not defined by what his super rich father wants him to do. And okay, why are you being a creeper then?
It's a bit unfortunate because you can kind of like, I kind of got that vibe early on because there is some line. Again, in the same chapter, they just casually revealed that this guy's gay and he's just, I guess, fucking with Reiko just to fuck with her. They also revealed that, like, oh, his dad doesn't know that he's gay. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, I can tell that's very quick coding to be like, you are meant to empathize a bit with this character. And I kind of got the vibe. I was like, oh, so I don't think this guy is quite, like, the antagonist with all of the answers that I thought he was going to be. And that's when I was like, I think I can check out here. I think we're going to take a little bit of time to, like, deal with his stuff. And then someone else will come in. And I was like, I enjoyed what I read a lot. Because I want to talk about my favorite chapter, actually.
Yeah.
My favorite chapter is, this is a little bit after they revealed that Reiko had some other life with Kudo at some point. And something happened and she doesn't remember it. So we have at this point started to like transition between scenes of the previous Reiko and Kudo together, where she is very much like the like bold, inspirational, like, let me show you around this town, kid, like super outgoing, like, you know, she is the person that he saw, you know, eat watermelon and smoke cigarettes, and that's what, you know, let him, like, it's all these sorts of things. And we juxtapose that with like the current day, and we do a chapter that is specifically about visiting her apartment at both times, and it is an absolutely heartbreaking chapter to read because it is, in, you know, the context of what you just read, a pretty casual chapter. You know, Reiko asks Kudo to help her carry a fish tank up to her apartment. But through these two different timelines, we realize how much has changed in her room, and more specifically to these people. Because all, like, we can see Reiko is acting nothing like how she did before. It's actually very funny. The way she starts up before is like, hey, come into my apartment. And Kudo's like, oh, I could never. And she's like, bitch, I don't care about that. And then like slams right in. And then it cuts to the present where Kudo is obviously used to having been let into this woman's apartment. So he's just kind of casually.
To provide some sense of context, before the original Kujirai was gone, she and Kudo were engaged to get married. They had a very close romantic relationship, which provides a lot of context for why Kudo acts very harshly and coldly towards current Reiko a lot.
Yeah,
at certain points.
It's you know, he has this kind of disposition now where he's just like, you gonna let me into your apartment? Because he's just kind of goes along with the flow. Like there's something out of him that's kind of defeated in all of this. And she's like, oh, no, hold on. Let me go change everything quick. Like, he still enjoys his life. So he still makes, like, a joke about something. He's like, oh, did you have to clean up your underwear or something? She's like, no, shut up. But, like, everything in the apartment is different. Even just, like, the small touches of what made somebody a person. Like, I get it. Like, you see those things that you're like, oh, man, I didn't even realize at the time how significant this was to have my identity of this person. Like, she would leave a glass of water in the fridge every night because she said it helped get rid of, like, the tap water taste. And he opens the fridge up now and he's like, oh, I guess you just drink tap water. And it's just like, damn, I feel for this guy. Like, this is definitely an awful situation. This is the woman you were engaged to, but at the same time, she is not whatsoever. And it creates this very heartbreaking but beautiful romance because, like, something is still there, even though Reiko is like undoubtedly just a different person now.
Yeah. There's a very heartbreaking scene at the end of all that where Kudo goes out onto the balcony to smoke, and he's sitting next to the specter of the old Reiko smoking out there. And it's like, that's why he's gone out there, is because being out there reminds him of her. And he feels her presence there, even though she's been gone for some time.
But it's the exact same apartment as well. Like everything, like, well, I mean, like the decor is different, but it's the same balcony.
Spoilers.
Okay.
So...
Well, at the time it was. I don't know. Maybe they revealed some detail at the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's weird.
Okay.
But there's a lot of very well placed metaphors in this story in terms of like when something is happening that has a symbolic meaning to it, the thing that you're supposed to understand will happen like right after.
Yeah.
So there'll be, a talk of like, what does, there's someone who says a little bit after that, I think it's Miyuki is the one who talks about it, but he says, imagine that you had a suitcase and you took it with you on all your trips all across the world. Like you went to, Dubai with it, and it was with you when your flight got delayed and stuff. You had been through all this stuff with it. And then one day it breaks and you can't use it anymore. Then you get a replacement. Even though you get the replacement, even if you decorate it the same and stuff, that's not the suitcase that you went on all those trips with. It is completely identical to the original in every single way. It's colored the same. It's the same manufacturer and everything, but it's not the same suitcase. And so you have an expectation of the original that this one reminds you of, but you know that this is wrong. This is not the same thing. And then we cut to a scene between Kudo and Kujirai, and it's like, oh, this is why things are so awkward for Kudo this entire time. He is constantly around this person who he is constantly aware, like, is just different from the person that, he had this very close relationship with, even though she is visibly and biologically, genetically, totally identical to the original. And there'll be that kind of thing that happens sometimes. And there are scenes, like you said, with the one where they go to her apartment that are very effective in that way, where there's a lot of stuff that's just not said. There's a lot of visual storytelling that happens. I do occasionally wish that somebody would come in and just fucking say what's going on, because
you do have to deal.
There's a lot of just like waiting for the answer to come. And then when it does come, it's like, oh, well, because it's just a couple of people talking about this the way that normal people talk about things, and there's not a lot of gravitas behind their explanation, it doesn't feel like this is a very big moment.
There's a moment, we talked about before how like the series will sometimes surprise you by just like having a character nonchalantly just bring up a very big thing. And there's a moment where Reiko wakes up and Kudo is like, do you want to hear about old Reiko? And she's like, it's like out of nowhere. It's not like the end of the chapter where you're like, oh, what's her answer going to be? Like, it's immediately, she's like, nah, I guess not. And he's like, oh, okay. You sure? He's like, yeah, I think so. He's like, all right. And then the chapter just goes on. And you're like, damn, this feels like you would have really milked my emotions out of this in a different series. You would have been like, oh, what is she? And you're just like, nah, they're not that's not what they're doing here. I do like a lot of the storytelling as well. One of the bits I really liked is that Reiko constantly is having vision issues because she refuses to wear glasses because she's kind of trying to hold on to anything she can have that makes her herself.
It makes her not the original Kujirai.
Yeah. And that's a large part of what she's trying to go for. She has a very great friendship. I mentioned her friend earlier, Yome, who is... I
love Yome. She's such a good friend.
She really is. She has this amazing scene as Reiko is going through all of her issues, which, again, this series, it's very easy to just bring up. She's like, I don't know if I'm the real me. And her friend's like, all right, bitch, let's figure it out.
Let's go shopping.
Yeah, let's work through these issues. And she has this great chapter. Yame has, like, had at this point full plastic surgery done to herself. She's given herself the figure she wants. And she has this great moment where she's like, look, a lot of people out there would look at someone like me and think what I'm doing with myself is fake. Or someone would look at you and look at it. And I think we need to, like, never... I wrote down the exact quote. She's like, we should never forget there are folks like us who know that fakes can genuinely sparkle. And it is, like, such
He's talking about it in terms of, like, cubic zirconium.
Yes.
How it's like fake diamonds, but they can still be beautiful.
And she's like, this is like an incredible thing to say to Reiko at this point, because she is drowning trying to figure out her place and everything. It is one of the few, like, heartbreaking things is what's his name? Miyuki. He says something when they first meet that helps her out a little bit, and then he immediately, like, goes and makes a fool of himself. And she doesn't get to enjoy what he said anymore because she connects it immediately to the fact that he tried to force himself on her. And it's nice that she has a great friend who can say a sentiment like that to her to help her build her confidence. Because, like, yeah, you're like, look, I don't know, but it sounds like you got a complicated history. Like, your lore section's going to be a whole fucking chunk, but you seem like a good girl, so, like, I think you should enjoy yourself, And I love that she has a good friend.
Yeah. There's a great a couple of chapters where Yome, like, starts to feel very self-conscious, like, because we all relapse in certain ways, even if we, like, have a thing that we feel confident in and a change we've made in ourselves. Sometimes something bad happens that make you kind of go back the other direction, and it's very powerful because you mentioned she had all this plastic surgery, and so there's a moment where she just looks in the mirror and all she can see is her old self, and she, like, goes and hides in her apartment, and while she's in the apartment, she's locked in there and she's by herself. She is always illustrated as her old self, not as how she currently appears. Even when Kujirai comes to her because she realizes her friend is in trouble, tries to talk to her through the door, while they're talking through the door, Yame is still drawn as her old self. And then Kujirai says something that helps to remind her of who she is and stuff. And when she bursts out of the door, she's just her current self again. And Kujirai has this big hug. It's, just like, there are moments like that are very good. And I feel like if the story had just been, like, all stuff like that, like, all a bunch of kind of mini stories about the people in this city, then I would like it more.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in terms of, like, okay, the overarching thing is bad. But in the sense of the overarching story takes a long time for things to develop. And when they develop, it doesn't feel like it took a long time for them to develop. It doesn't feel like a payoff to anything. It's a bit frustrating, and I don't really get a sense of fulfillment from reading it. I did think that this story was actually very easy to read. I think a lot of it goes by very quickly because there's a lot of visual storytelling. There's not a lot of heavy dialogue, and the chapters aren't super long. So I got through a lot of it very quickly, and I was enjoying the experience of reading it. But if this were something where I were caught up on the story and were waiting for more of it to come out, I would be dying.
Yeah.
Because I would be not only, like, feeling like I was getting crumbs every single chapter of going on to progress that ongoing plot, but also I would feel like I would have a hard time keeping track of things as they happen too, because there's not that steady progression of events. It kind of seems to happen in big steps.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would struggle to remember everything relevant in addition to everything else. So I'm not going to read any more of this. I thought it was totally fine for what I did read. And I am glad that I read something that is very different from the type of stuff that I would usually read. But this is enough for me.
Yeah. I'll keep it very quick because I know we got a lot of manga to talk about. I like this series. I wish I loved it. I think there are moments I really, really enjoyed, but I feel like the tone eventually started to lose me. And at this point, I think the only time I would consume this is if it was done. If I knew I can just read the whole series, then I might stick with it. But as is, I feel like this is something I would recommend to the right person.
Kowloon Generic Romance is getting an anime release next year and a live-action movie adaptation next year.
That bodes
So
well for getting an English release as well.
Hopefully, because then, maybe we could eventually actually read the whole thing, and maybe we would have different opinions on it.
Maybe the real Generic Romance, Nick, is the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, okay.
All
sure.
right. Sounds good. Nick, let's move on to the recap portion of Weekly Manga Recap, starting with Undead Unluck number 231. Remember, so Julia has just activated Unjustice for the first time, and she's like, oh my gosh, did I do it? And Victor's like, yeah, didn't you see the attack missed? And she's like, oh, that was me. I guess I just don't really know how this goes yet. And Soul takes a moment to be like, if you're not ready yet, then I'm going to fucking kill you. And Victor is just excited. He's like, oh, it's activated. And Julia's like, what do you mean? His attack isn't stopping. What's happening? And we cut to outside where Julia and Victor are blasted into the sky. And Julia's like, we ended up taking the attack. But Victor's like, but we made it outside. That's much better, actually. And Fuko is all excited. She smiles because she realizes if they're out here, Julia has Unjustice. That means there's nothing left. She's like, I can do it. Pulls out Remember, and she's like, with this, we will win for sure. And she activates Remember, and we get this 1.5 page spread of all the members of Union having Remember used on them. And I think there's a lot you can read into in this because everyone sort of has some level of sort of shock or awe, but it's worth noting that particular characters have specific reactions. A lot of the people who were bad guys in the previous loop have kind of more stoic expressions. Void does not look like he's mad or anything, but it looks like there's a sense of knowledge in that for him. And Rip is crying, but it seems to be happy crying. And I was like, oh, I think for some of these people, this is a relief.
I think that he and Mui realized that they died next to each other.
Yeah. So they say, all right, take the memories from all the loops ingrained within our members' souls and set them free. So there we go. Also, Ana-un, I guess, is in there. I didn't even realize, but that would be an awesome, cool detail. So we cut over to the fight with War as Billy has just remembered everything that happened. Oh, okay. I think we figured out our tone that's going to be going on here. All of War's equipment just starts falling off. And he's like, hey, what the fuck's going on? And then Justice stabs him in the back of the head. And War is dead. And she's like, hey, Billy, go ahead and copy Unjustice. You could do that now, right? And he's like, yeah, I guess, thanks to you. All right, you go help the others. And she hops off. And we cut over to the fight with Time. And Time's like, War was taken out. No, that can't be. And it distracts him for just a moment. Fang comes out and literally punches Time's core straight out of his body and just crushes it. And he's like, sucks to suck. You shouldn't have turned your back on me twice. But Time's like, all right, fine. If you're going to kill me, then at the very least, I will take all of your time away. And goes to, I guess, consume all of Fang's time. But instead, starts making him younger. And he realizes that Julia has shown up with Unjustice.
Oh no! The Uno reversed me. Oh no!
Yeah, it's a lot of that, and I do love that we have this full-on Shadow the Hedgehog, just you didn't have to help me, Harumph, turning his head, Fang's just full-on Sun. I don't want to admit that I enjoyed the fact that you've given me a youth again or anything like that.
It's also weird that the pigmentation is still gone from his hair, but that mustache fell away. I don't really get that. So hair growth got reversed, but not hair color loss? All right.
Yeah, I think Mui might have also been the same. It makes sense that your follicles, I guess, would need to grow back again to gain your old hair color. I don't know. Not a big issue. Anyway, Julia's like, look, you deserve this. You fought with us all the way to the very end, Fang. Cut over to the fight with 6. Billy is running with Rip and Latla, and Rip is just like, what the fuck, dude? I thought you could copy Unjustice. He's like, I can. I've just never used it against a UMA. And it's very funny because Rip's like, how the fuck did Remember nerf you? Like, how did this make you worse at your job? But don't worry. Untouchable and Back show up because their memories are back. They crush 6. Back gets the core. It looks like everything's good there. Cut over to Yusai, who has survived against Justice. We don't even see this fight. Unjustice won off screen.
Yep.
And she's defeated him, and she's just like, hey, thanks, Yusai, for surviving as long as you did against this guy.
Wow, what a terrible battle that could have been.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
This is a real, like, guys, this would have been a pretty sweet, like, awful fight if we hadn't showed, but thankfully, we did. And at that point, Julia's like, all right, that means there's only one fight left. And we go over, we see Change. That fight's happening. I guess there's more, but we'll get to that in a second. The Change fight is still going on. So Change fight is happening, and Change is like, you can't, no matter what you throw at me, I will change it. Like, it will never defeat me. A vessel like you stands no chance against a rule. And Gina just makes the comment, long time no see, jaunty justy, as Unjustice just stabs Change in the head and stops her change from activating. So shoop, she just gets completely bisected. You can even see her little core inside of her head, and I was like, that's a cute detail. In that moment, Gina has killed her with her hat sword, which I guess is just what I have to call it. And she knows, sort of unconsciously, she's like, this needs to get thrown into the air right now. So she's like, hey, dearest Deddy and Little Lucky, no, Fuko, remembering her more current loop where Fuko has been her friend. Help her out. Cut over to Luck, who's like, hey, some shit's going on. Boom, head cut off. We can see that Luck had gotten hit with a bad bullet. So the Luck is coming, but Unjustice negated Luck's ability to be lucky and dodge the attack. So their head just gets straight up cut off. I guess that also gets their core. I guess that's what you can kind of see at the bottom of the head. Death is like, you monster! And Andy and Victor just nuke him. Like, just straight up, just shoot a bunch of blood. And I think that's the core at the middle just being destroyed and eviscerated. And we end the chapter with a 1.5 page spread of all the Union members gathered together saying, all right, how much time left of this split? I'm assuming referring to the split between Victor and Andy. How long do we have? And they're like, I think we got about 10 minutes. That's plenty of time. So, hey, just Soul and Soul left to deal with, I guess. Nick, I'm getting the impression from your facial expressions and words that you did not care for the actions of this chapter.
This is the worst chapter of Undead Unluck we've ever covered on this podcast.
Wow. Okay.
I hated this with a capital H. This is like everything that I was kind of like dreading was going to be the case of like, oh, we'll just like speed through all these fights that it felt like we were going to have, set up. And in one or two cases, like there's a cool visual that happens, but like, fuck's sake. Fucking Fuko's counterpart didn't get to do shit. She just died, and that was just it. All this stuff that we had set up in terms of like, this character's going to be important, it's going to be an obstacle for them to overcome. No, it's just we're speedrunning this, like super, super, super speedrunning it. And I get that there is like a appeal to, okay, well, we've got the tide turning thing, so all the battles we see the tide turning. But we didn't really see enough of a lot of the conflicts for it to feel like this was like an important turnabout. I don't think we saw like any of the fight with Sick before. No,
just enough to show that even though they had kind of beaten him once before, they were still kind of having trouble with him again. I was like, I don't know. I feel like you did a lot of off-screen stuff to explain that like Rip probably should know Souls by now, so he should just be able to cut Soul or Sick in the Soul and deal with it. Like, I don't know.
And I feel like this is not just going to be like oh, you're a bad writer, Yoshifumi Tezuka. I'm pretty sure that this is going to turn to be like, look, things needed to fast forward because someone said, look, the Undead Unluck anime underperformed, guys, and we've got to wrap this shit up. I feel like that's going to be the case. And if it's not, then I strongly question the decision behind doing this. So...
I would honestly disagree, if only because I was going to be kind of shocked if we had gotten full fights from everything. Because when you think of this series, Undead Unluck...
in the battle series?
Well, it's very interesting, because this is the thing. There are a lot of fights in Undead Unluck. But, like, I think if you were to actually, like, put the statistics down, I think there's, like, one, maybe two fights that don't involve either Andy or Fuko in it. Like, this was not a series that ever said, like, hey, let's show off the side casts that much. Like, we got a little bit for Shen and Gina and stuff like that, you know, but that was always, like, kind of side kicking to somebody else. So I was like, oh, what are we going to do when we don't have Fuko or Andy to rely on? And the answer is, we don't. We get a little bit with Gina and a little bit with Shen and a smidgen, a little morsel you can write something in on, I guess, for Billy. But everyone else is just going to get little clips. And don't worry, we dealt with these fights. I kind of appreciate to some degree that this series made a character who can't lose and they stuck with it. Like, they didn't find a way to negate this ability. Because, like, I can't argue that Unjustice is 100% used correctly here. It should show up and one-shot every fucking stupid fight because that's how this ability works. You can absolutely argue you shouldn't have had that. But, like, I do kind of appreciate if you put it in, if you like, it's, I guess, the opposite.
Quinn, we're not gonna meet in the middle.
No, we're not. That's fair.
Everything you're saying to me sounds like you are trying not to be sad right
now. No, I legitimately did not have an issue with this chapter. I think
and the intellectual part of me believes you, but the part of me that hates this thinks, oh, sure. she is kidding herself right now.
Look, there's drugs in the system. There's other stuff going on. Like, maybe this isn't my perfect headspace, but I'm also just like, I don't know. Like, they did tell us that this was going to happen for a while now. I think the bigger, more upsetting thing is that two of the fights really got no focus, and particularly the fights against Luck and Death. Like,
the two there was big bads out of this group that were not Soul. Like, it's ridiculous, and like I understand that everything was set up in terms of like, we have to buy time until Injustice is unlocked. Injustice got unlocked, and then the tide turned. It's like that. You did what you said you were going to do. Great.
Yeah.
Remember how great the fight with language was, Quinn?
Remember that? That's the thing. And that's the exception, I think, proved my rule. Because that's the only fight I can think of that did not involve either Andy or Fuko in it. And I'm like, that was really good. But maybe that was really difficult to write or something like that. Like, I'm just like, was it that?
So it means,
look,
so bad at this. Okay.
I'm just saying.
I know what I'll do. I'll make a union of 20 plus members that have the big fight, and 2 of them are important.
Let's talk about Blue Box, everybody.
I want everyone to understand we're not like upset with each other. This is just us.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
It's just us shooting the shit, and we are allowed to have different opinions. So.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, y'all. Blue Box, chapter 173. Let me carry that weight. So last time, Chinatsu's father unexpectedly showed up in the Yamata household, and you know that this is a bad thing, of course, because of all the tension between him and Chinatsu and everything. He even says that he apparently did send her a message, and she, had a lot that she was dealing with, basketball stuff. And so she's like, oh, I didn't see it. And so she sees that, that is on her phone. They establish that her father is staying in a hotel the night, and he's going to actually be renting an apartment month to month going forward because he has to be in town again for work. He can no longer just be overseas, at least for the time being. Which means that Chinatsu will still be staying with Taiki's family while this is going on. Because this is not like a permanent solution for him. She's not just going to go back with the family. There's an amusing interruption of this because Taiki's grandfather is like, "Oh, then I could drink with you."
This sounds pretty sweet.
And like, he says, "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." And he's like, "But no one will drink a nightcap with me." He's just so upset that no one drinks with him.
You're like, well, 50% of this house is like are children, so.
And the other two, have to get up early in the morning.
Yeah, the other one gets up earlier than Taiki gets up, and he gets up stupid early.
Yeah, and then they're like, they're like, "All right, well, let's just have dinner." And again, Taiki's grandfather was like, "A toast! Someone drink with me!" Time passes. It's morning then, and Chinatsu, of course, is gonna, go and do her morning workout. Her father is awake because of the time difference, the jet lag and stuff. So he's there when she's about to head out. He has a little bit of a one-on-one conversation with her, and he asks her, like, "Hey, how are your entrance exams going for university?" She says, I had an interview. He asks about her basketball. She says, "Yeah, the next game's going to be our second in the Winter Cup qualifiers." He says, "All right, yeah, you're working hard. Okay." And then she says, "Dad, I got to tell you, Taiki and I are going out." I love that Blue Box just does this.
Yep.
Just, hey, that awkward situation that you thought was going to be hanging over everybody's heads for chapters and chapters of it? Let's just get it out of the way. Let's just have people deal with situations like human beings have to.
I can't tell you how much of a relief it is to get those sorts of things. I always have like a special fondness for Boardwalk Empire, where in the first episode, one character betrays another one. And I was like, it's going to be an entire season slowly revealing this information. By the end of the episode, he's like, "Hey, just to let you know, I robbed your truck, but it's to let you know that like I'm kind of going into this shit." And I'm like, dope. I like this. Also, yeah, as Ninja says, she's taking Taiki's dad's advice about like, don't hide this,
Yeah. So she says straight up, like, "We're going out." And I love that we get to see that he's a human very quickly, because he's like, he doesn't know how to react to that for a second. So she's very serious, and then he thinks
it also might be because he's like, every time he looks at Chinatsu, he's like, "Does my child ever blink?" Her eyes are always just so wide. He's like, is it when I'm not looking it happens? I nursed her at one point. Like, I gave her a bottle. I know she should blink at some point, but I don't see it.
So he says very quickly, "When you get back, pack your things. You're going to stay with me at the apartment." And Chinatsu says, "You just said yesterday that the apartment is too far from school, and this is an important time for me. I've got to practice and everything." And he says, "Look, I know about your relationship now. I can't let you two live together any longer." Which, that's very reasonable, like, reaction for a parent to have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the stuff that follows is not, but the whole, like, you're like 17 and you're living under the same roof as your boyfriend? No, like, I can't do that. He says as well, like, "Look, you said that you wanted to stay here because of basketball." And she says, "Look, we're not doing anything bad. And it's because I'm in a relationship with Taiki that I've been able to get through the hard times." And then, of course, he comes in with the dagger and says, "But you couldn't get into nationals because, of course, she failed last year." Which, of course, is the most unfair thing he could possibly say. It wasn't Chinatsu's fault. She got hurt in that game that they lost. There was nothing she could do about it. So she doesn't fucking let him get away with it. She just says, "That's the most hurtful thing you could possibly say to me." And she runs out of the room. She grabs her stuff. She runs outside.
I don't know. I don't know if I would call it doesn't let him get away with it, being like, "You jerk," and then kind of crying and leaving. Like, it's one of those moments, like, no matter what I said, I'd always kind of be like, I guess I really didn't kind of come out of that the winner when I, like, grabbed my bag and cried and left.
Well, she lets him know how she feels.
Yes, she doesn't
Very
hide that part. She does
Right.
say quite clearly, that was the worst thing you could have said to me.
Taiki happens to be there, like, as she is getting out the door. Just catches her, sees that her dad is there, and he immediately realizes what has happened because he remembers the conversation they had before, where she was wondering if it would be a good thing to tell her dad. And he realizes that didn't go well. That's bad. We see Chinatsu at practice. She is clearly trying not to let this affect her. She is, practicing hard, and everyone is saying like, "Wow, she's doing great. She didn't let the injury hold her back," and you can tell there's a lot of pressure on her, but she does not let it affect her. Which she doesn't let it affect her now, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people who are overestimating her ability because she is a teenager, and pressure is bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, Chinatsu practices by herself after the team practice is done, and she just thinks like, if I just prove myself with results, he can't say anything. I won't hear any objections. And I know I can't argue with him. We did lose, but no matter what he says and no matter how I feel about it, I won't let anything mess up what I have worked so hard on. And it's, the trap of like, if you could just convince yourself like, I am the one that this is all on, I have to be the one to change it, then sometimes that's not the case. And just like she said, because she has Taiki, she's able to get through the hard times because Taiki approaches her in this moment.
Yeah.
It's a very cute bit too, because like she's like, like kneeling and just like focused on herself. And it pans back and Taiki's right behind her, and she heard him coming up behind her somehow. He says like, yeah, I get that your dad doesn't approve of us. And she says, I'll take care of everything. And Taiki takes the basketball from her hands and says, let me carry some of that weight. And he just gives her a reassuring smile and says, I've got an idea. We cut to Chinatsu's father, being, at the new apartment.
He's
like,
very businessman-y. He's like, must look at my phone. Yeah.
And he sees he has not gotten a message from Chinatsu and says, fine, I'll just go and get her then. And as he is going out the door, Taiki is there. And he says, it's me, Taiki Inamata.
It's me.
He says, please let me live with you in Chinatsu-senpai's place. What
a dork.
A wonderful boyfriend this man is.
What a beautiful dork this kid is. Come on. I think we should really note the very specific sort of turnabout here, which is like, oh, I don't think Chinatsu's dad is quite the piece of shit he was kind of made out to be. Not that I was like, I think we are misled, but this chapter shows that there is definitely some level of humanity to him, because he actually seems to regret that he said what he did to her about nationals. Like, there's a moment where we see his eye after he says it, and it's like he even realizes, like, fuck, shouldn't have said that one. And
well, we're rolling that one on that one.
Yeah, he's like, I took an L there. What are you gonna do? And you also get why he says that, because there's a part of him that is like, did you just stay in Japan to fuck around with a boy? Like, is that what this was actually about? And he realizes, he's like, no, that isn't my kid. Like, I know Chinatsu, or at least that's what I'm kind of guessing. He realized, he's like, that isn't what I'm saying, but I said the wrong thing, even though I am rightfully a little taken aback by this news. So,
right. But of course, the solution that is presented is, hey, if your problem is that they're going to live under the same roof, they won't live under the same roof. And Taiki knows, like, hey, Chinatsu's in this tournament right now. She needs to be able to practice as much as she can. She needs to be close to the school. So I'll be far from the school.
Exactly.
And then we won't be under the same roof. And so her dad won't have any objection because we won't be living together. Now, Chinatsu's dad,
I am hoping for some...
Here's my favorite snacks, and I expect you to keep that fridge stocked.
I am hoping for some real fucking roommate shenanigans between these two. Like, some real, like, oh, you don't take your socks off when you sit on the couch, huh? Oh, no, that's nothing. I just didn't know I just didn't want, fucking dirty ass feet on this couch, but whatever. I mean, I guess it's your house.
No,
too,
you are
so.
just exclusively resting just on the soles of your feet on the couch. There is like no ass to cushion contact at all whatsoever. You're stooping out like a gargoyle. Like, wow.
You don't use coasters at all, huh? You just don't respect any kind of wood? Is that it?
You don't respect any kind of wood.
I'm looking forward. I really do want there to be like wacky chapters of these two together, but I also expect he might just drop Taiki off and be like, this kid's so fucking innocent, I can't imagine him doing anything untoward to anyone ever, so here's your fucking son back. But we shall see.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, no.
Black Clover!
I forgot this is next.
Scoop!
Yeah, Nick, we have 3 chapters of We Never Learn this week, starting with the 2-page spread on page 374, Demon God, and it's the characters who are going to be involved in this upcoming fight. Of course, we have Ichika, we have Yami.
Yummy.
We have Nature Boy Ric Flair, and of course, Morgan, aka Morgan Webb of TV's X-Play. So we have a big cast of characters here to talk about. Really good stuff. Anyways,
it's Morgan time.
It's Morgan time. So God, this is going to be so much to recap. They're about to fight. Morgan's like, hey, Nature Boy Ric Flair, you and me, let's fucking go. We're about to have a real fight. Oh, we never learn? Wait, what? Did I say we never learn instead of Black Clover?
I think you may have.
Oh, wow. All right, well, we also got a series from the We Never Learn guy in here that I forgot to open
Guys,
up.
can we talk about We Never Learn instead of Taishi Tsusui's new series? Maybe we could do that? Anyway, Black Clover.
Can we talk about it instead of these chapters of Black Clover? So, look, a Lucius clone shows up. And they realize it's a Lucius clone and Morgan. So this is going to be real bad. Nature Boy Ric Flair's like, this is going to be rough. Let's go. He activates his big black, prison attack. And he's like, Ichika, you need to save Yami because he's dying. Keep them busy. And figure it out, basically. And she runs over and Yami's like, oh, damn, I'm dying. I'm even hallucinating Chika right now. And he's like, oh, damn, wait. Actually, it's her. And she's like, brother, wake up. Like, you're dying. And he's like, oh, what are you doing here? And she's like, your student's magic brought me and Asta here. And he's like, oh, Asta's alive. Dope. Like, he isn't this, like, cool, but he is, like, weirdly stoically dying at this. Right. So it's just like, all right, looks like everything worked out.
Nice.
But she starts apologizing because she's like, look, I never realized, like, you didn't kill everybody. You only killed Father after he had gone insane. I was the one that actually ended up killing the whole clan, and you took the blame and left, and I never knew that, and I blamed you for it the whole time, and I'm truly so sorry for that. And Nami's like, yeah, no big. Don't worry. It was cool. And we get, like, a flashback where...
Is this Rob Van Dam in WWE?
Yeah,
it's cool. Whatever, man.
I can't tell you that's the vibe I'm getting from his dialogue here, where he's just like, it's all right. I talked to Ryu, and I told him I'd be cool with it. And, like, we see a flashback, and he's like, Ryu's like, hey, be careful out there. He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to, like, go over there. And he's like, I don't know. I'll just get, like, really strong and live the life I want, basically. It sounds like it's going to be pretty cool, actually. So, I don't know. Maybe when you're Shogun someday, I'll come back and visit you. And he's like, okay, we'll be waiting for you, me and Ichika both. And Ichika's, he thanks Ryu for all this. But Ichika's like, oh my god, his wounds are so deep. He is going to die. But in an emergency, Lord Ryuya gave me this to give to you. And she pulls out this pill. She's like, oh, it's the Demon Soul pill. Why would he give me a thing like this? This massacred my whole village. Well, Nick, wouldn't you know that Yami instinctually knows? He's like, I get it. You think I can handle it, don't you, Rhea? And he eats it. And they're like, it turns out it doesn't make you insane. Instead, it supercharges all of your physical abilities. And most people just lose their mind to that much power. But what if somebody was really, really strong?
Then it would just eliminate the downside.
Yeah, then it would be perfectly awesome, and you should take it all the time, I guess. I don't.
Drugs are good if you're already healthy, basically.
They're like, look, this is healing him at this point. What's his face? Lucius clone, Master Luscious. He comes down there. He's gonna attack, but it's fine because all of Yami's injuries are healed. And he grabs Ichika and pulls her close and blocks attack. I think his design is a little silly, but it still kind of looks cool. If you're going, he gets like big devil horns and shit like that, and I'm like, I don't know, it's very Black Clover, I guess, but I don't know. He just cuts Lucius clone down. He's just like, all right, done, and he's like, don't worry, Ichika, I'm gonna protect you this time.
That's a good thing that Ichika can be protected now.
Yeah. So page 375 of Black Clover, strafe punishment or just punishment in a different language. I can't read it. I don't know. It's kind of hard on this text. We cut back to a few minutes earlier to basically explain what's going on in the
Nature Boy Ric Flair did the job. That's what happened.
He was. I'll say this is the chapter I probably like the most out of it, because he's like, look, I could tell that this darkness magic, like the one who's controlling my brother, is the evil Lucifugus. Terrifying. But he recognizes, like, this is no longer Morgan, so I have to just defeat him along with the Lucius clone. So he activates 3 of his magics at once. That's how you knew this dude wasn't going to win this fight, because you're like, you didn't want to use all 4? Like, you have more than that. So he starts, like, just zipping about and attacking. It seems relatively ineffectual, and the Lucius clone just fucking books it. He's like, all right, well, peace. Like, this ain't really anything. So Morgan's taunting him, just like, oh, brother, it looks like you're hurting. I'll set you free. We have to cut outside real quick to show that the Lucius clone is dying, and it's like, wow, who thought you'd still have that?
Wow, you sure are strong.
You sure are pretty awesome. And, Yami's like, fuck off. Like, you're talking with my best friend, one of my friend's faces. Like, I don't like you. I hope you die, basically. And the Lucius clone is just like, well, perhaps you and I may be strong, but Morgan is a lot stronger than both of us now. Oh, no. And it looks like Morgan has defeated Nature Boy Ric Flair, even with Asta's anti-magic. But Yami's
man. Even when you put on the Red Eyes Black Dragon armor that Joey used in the Orichalcos arc.
Yeah. It was... He basically is just like, look, something's up with this kid. He's going through something. He shouldn't have lost this. So as Nature Boy Ric Flair is falling, he's just like, look, as a Magic Knight of this kingdom and as vice captain of the Black Bulls, I know I have to defeat Morgan. But I've already killed my brother once, and I can't bear to do it again. And I did feel emotional for that, because that is something that's very difficult. This idea of someone who does just hurt so much that they're like, I don't want to have to do this pain again. Like, it's daunting. It's scary, It's
a good panel. I like
yeah.
I like the way that Morgan is looking serenely, like his old self, and Noct is just in despair. He looks unlike himself. Nature Boy Ric Flair.
Oh, okay.
He's, because he's got, like, his eyes are very emotional and full of tears when you're used to just him having that shit-eating,
yeah.
eyes slitted look. It's probably the best moment of all 3 chapters.
Yeah, and he's just thinking, he's like, damn it, I really thought I had gotten over this, but I guess I'm not. And, Morgan looks like he's going to finish. He's like, all right, brother, let's start it over again together. And it looks like he's going to kill him, but Yami deflects the blow. And they're like, whoa, he defeated that Luscious clone so fast? And they're like, yeah, dog, they suck. They're not actually that tough when you get right down to it. And, Yami's like, look, like, does this look like a time for you to cry? Like, Morgan's already, and she's like, look, I get it. I know that he's dead. But Yami's like, are you planning to let him kill more people? He lived to save people. He was basically good incarnate. He is dead. And you chose to shoulder that sin for the rest of your life, right? You've got to be the one to put him back down into the ground. And in classic Yami fashion, he says something nice in a rude way. He's like, Are you just pathetic and scared because you're doing this all alone? Well, you're not, because I'm here with you. Let's fight him together. And that is the motivation that he seems to need to start figuring out in the last chapter. Page 376, Atonement, in a different language. So we start with Nature Boy Claire thinking about a dream he always has of him joining the Grey Deer, and he, Yami, and Morgan are a team, and they would fight over Morgan, and he would just smile, and then when he wakes up, he gets really sad. As somebody who has also very recently had a grief dream about my brother, I get it. It just happens. That does suck. Oh my god, there's so much in this. So Yami's gonna try to fight this guy for a little bit because Nature Boy Flair still hasn't figured out his own shit. And he's like, look, Morgan doesn't have cool dialogue anymore. She's like the pre-coded dialogue for his fucking magic type. He's like, my own magic
I'm so strong.
Yeah, he just has to shoot out a bunch of laser beams and shit like that. And Ichika goes up to Nature Boy Flair while this is happening. He's like, look, I don't know much about your relationship with my brother, but from what Asta told me, after brother defended me and was driven from our homeland, he was in a foreign nation you know nothing about, and he inspired all sorts of people. And I almost made my brother have to shoulder everything by himself again. And I can't possibly just stand by and watch if something tragic, as if I were some tragic princess. I have to be involved. So she's activating her magic at this point. Lasers are going. Yami's still getting his shit pulled in. But then, boom, hey, Chica's there to help. And it's all right, we'll fight alongside you. They're going to do a combo darkness spell. And we'll negate some of this light and all that stuff. We cut over to Nature Boy Flair standing on a roof. And he's like, I was trying to take the easy way out, telling myself I could die at any time. But tears don't mark the end of a sin. And he activates all 4 of his forms at once.
No, he looks dumber now.
Oh no, he looks stupid now. He activates all of his forms. He teams up with Yami and Ichika. I'm just going to cut to the end here because who cares? They all yell together.
They yell, there's lasers.
Yeah, and they get a thing that's just yeah, you might be light, but the brighter the light, the deeper the shadow it casts.
That's not technically true.
No, Nick, if you shine a bright enough light, that means its shadow is going to go hard.
Darkness is the absence of light, so
I wish you were the guy who pops out of the house to be like,
actually, it's not.
Thank you for defeating the paladins. I do need to let you all know, though, so you don't continue to go on believing this, that is not actually what shadows are.
I understand that the magic that you cast is a special sort of anti-life thing, and so it's not technically shadow, which is what you're referring to. So shadow, you see, is really the absence of light. You just get shoved into the house.
Yeah, they toss you up into one of the paladins to cut you in half. You're like, fair. I should have waited until the parade, at least.
Now, I may be dying, but I am correct, and that's what really matters.
So really, when you think about it, I'm the true victor here. As your dying body falls down. So even though I have a shadow, it's not necessarily the amount of light that creates this big of a shadow. So just take my last words to heart. Anyway, Nature Boy Flair says goodbye. I will shoulder this pain forever. And look, Black Clover is not god awful. I have learned to love it in certain ways, but this is a restaurant where you go into it and you're like, I would like a ham sandwich, and they bring you out a ham sandwich. You're like, this is a great ham sandwich, and you go in the next time you ask for a salad, and they just bring you out a ham sandwich. You're like, oh, okay, I was kind of looking for something different, but that, I enjoyed the ham sandwich. I'll have it again. And then the next time you're like, oh, I'll get the salad. And they just keep bringing you the ham sandwich. You're like, oh, this is a restaurant where I could just get one thing forever. I can only ever just get characters being sad and then happy and then working together and yelling real hard. And if that's your jam, Black Clover was probably pretty cool for you. I needed a little bit more, but it was still somewhat enjoyable. The second chapter worked better than the other two.
There's a place that's, I can't remember the name of it, but it's got something of a nationwide presence where they only serve chicken wings, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kind of like that.
It is. Like, you know, sometimes you're really in the mood for it, but especially...
Yeah, if you don't want the chicken wings, then you're out of luck.
Yeah, and especially when you only get these chapters once every 3 months or so, like...
Yeah. Chainsaw Man.
Brum.
I don't really have thoughts on the
No,
chapter.
I think I explained myself enough to be like, it's dumb that this drug that was established to make you go insane is actually a super cool healing drug, and you just had to be like tough enough.
You just needed to be super strong before you took the steroids, and then there's no side effects to using them, guys.
Yeah, I feel like there was a better explanation possible there, and they just went with like, what's the easiest and coolest one?
Chainsaw Man. By the way, if you haven't seen it yet, the Look Back OVA is available on Amazon Prime. It's free with the subscription. And if you've never read Look Back, read it. If you've never watched Look Back, watch it. It's beautiful and horrible. And
yeah,
beautiful.
I'm really trying to be careful right now with what kind of media I consume to kind of keep the right mood going, and I'm like, I just don't know if I'm ready to do Look Back yet.
I don't blame you. It's really hard. I turned into a fountain of tears for like the entire last third of it.
To real quick interrupt, Zerot82 in our chat is asking about the Boruto review, and I'm saying this also for the people who are listening. Boruto did come out today. We are going to discuss Boruto next week because with 3 chapters of Black Clover, a recommendation, a new series, it just felt like there was going to be too many things to add Boruto on top of. Like, we already have a lot we have to get through in like the next 80 minutes. So, no, we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I think that Look Back is one of the most beautiful things that I have ever read. And when it came out a few years ago, it was kind of one of those things where I didn't think I could encounter those types of media that have that kind of effect on me at the age that I was. And I'm glad that I found that I could still. So anyway, nothing Tatsuki Fujimoto ever does is ever going to be as good as that. Let's read his much more popular thing that he writes.
Yes.
It's chapter 184, Run, Denji! That one guy who holds onto trees is still screaming while they're in the Aging Devil's realm. Asa has just kind of sat down, and Denji's running. He's just running laps around the lake in the Aging Devil's realm. Asa asks Yoru why he's doing this, and he says, like, he said he had a plan, he just started doing it. Any idea why? And Yoru says nothing. She just kind of like stares too. No visible reaction, which is a little interesting. But I think she says this. She says that he's probably the same as that guy over there holding the tree. I think he's just fleeing from reality. So not a lot of faith in Denji's plan here, as he is, running around in circles with no, explanation of what he's trying to do. As this happens, the Aging Devil's face starts to appear in some of the trees that are actually people, and just pokes out and says, like, you gotta understand what's going on by now, right? Hey, if you do what I say, I'll save you. I'll let you out. Your heart should be connected to the Chainsaw Man in the real world, so convince him to eat me. And then she says, why the hell do you want that? And the Aging Devil says, because a lot of kids will die. And I really want that to happen.
I fucking hate kids. I do like this idea of the Aging Devils, just like the ones I don't get are the young ones. Like, I don't get to kill any of the kids with my power.
And he says, like, all you gotta do is sacrifice the lives of children and you'll be saved. And then she says, Chainsaw Man's a superhero, dude.
I love Denji's reaction so much.
He says, does it occur to you that maybe Pochita didn't eat you because he doesn't want to kill kids to save himself? And the Aging Devil says, like, oh, all right, you seem really optimistic. And then she says, problem? He got him.
Yeah.
But the Aging Devil's like, I mean, I'm just kind of surprised that you, like, just moved on really quickly. And he points out, like, you just had a family member die. Have you really already bounced back? If so, you can't have loved her very much. what is this guy's deal?
Yeah, it turns out the fucking aging devil's a little cunty too. Like she's got a little bit of fucking sass in her.
Denji doesn't answer right away, but when he does, he's actually got a weird, like, exerted smile on his face as he says, like, you don't know anything about my relationship with her. And you know what? I will find family again at some point. And if they die too, I'll find another new family. Tough luck, bad guys! I can make a perpetual motion machine! Which is a really, really weird callback to the devil that he was stuck in the hotel with all that time ago.
Uh-huh.
But he says, yeah, if you want to do something with my heart, give me a family again. And the agent devil's like, I thought that the human Chainsaw Man would listen to reason, but he's even more stupid. That's right. Never underestimate how stupid Denji is, guys. And he's also like, what is he even trying to do? Wait, you can't think you can just run your way out of here. And at that moment, Denji stops running. And, he's clearly, tired. He's sweating and panting. And he says, you're the stupid one, stupid.
I love this shit. I'm legit starting to be like, I need to be more like Denji. They were right. Intelligence is a curse. I need to be the dumbest fucking person I can think of.
He says, my escape plan's already in motion. I have no idea what this stupid boy is planning. You know what? I am confident it's gonna work.
I'm legit thinking that he is just gonna run so long he gets sick and throws up whatever. Like, he's gonna find some way to, like, throw up a devil that gets him out of here or something. Like, I'm just like, some crazy shit's about to happen. But I love that, like, the aging devil's just like, oh, the human side's actually dumber than the other one. Like, I didn't realize the one that doesn't talk and just goes like, duh, 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 is actually the genius of the two of you.
Oh, man. Yeah. Weird little chapter of Chainsaw Man. I liked it.
Yeah.
Astro Royale, Chapter 30, Testing a Hypothesis. We get a color page spread here. Very movie poster looking. I liked it.
Yes.
We get the most random beginning of this chapter, which is, Genji is visiting Torazo in prison. And that's the first chapter. That's the first page. That's it. That's all that we get from that. Back to Plan Zero. It's up to Kinpa to beat Himaru because, Himuro, rather, because Hibaru got his ass frozen saving her. So he's shooting his cannon thing, trying to freeze her. She's hiding around stuff, and he's mocking her, saying, like, I'm going to get you eventually. And you know what? You chasing you around reminds me of 7 years ago, and if Genji Obata hadn't interfered that day, I would have killed you too! And anyway, that's why Genji is in this chapter, and why he was on the first page, is because let us know we're gonna get some insight on his relationship with Kinpa, kind of. So Torzo has brought him up to speed on the whole situation involving Imuro, and Genji's shocked to learn all this. And he says, like, he might be after Kinpa, because he probably actually lured them into the plant to get rid of Hibaru's faction all at once. He could kill him without leaving behind evidence there. And Torzo's like, oh, okay, yeah. And Genji says, back then, Himuro and I were colleagues working security for the plant, because I was working for the Otsurugi family, he was working for the government. Because, yeah, there was, like, a joint, like, investment in the project. And he says, like, yeah, he killed Kinpa's parents, and by the time I got there, it was too late. We see that he did actually, like, come in on Himuro, like, in the aftermath of this. And Himuro, because he hates the Otsurugis, pointed his gun at him, was going to shoot him too. And very suddenly, Genji goes, Himuro, stop! There's a gas leak! All right. But Himuro did not listen, so there's an explosion. Boom! So, you want to know how he got these scars? He was a dummy, that's how. He just shot his gun while there was a gas leak.
You want to know how I got these scars? I should have figured out where I was shooting and not fired into a combustible room, actually. It's not that interesting.
So, Torazo, before we cut away from there, asks, like, oh, are you worried about her? It's like, yes. Yes. It's his adopted daughter, yes.
It would be so wild if he was like, I could take it or leave it. I'd kind of like to have my old study back.
I can always get another one.
I didn't raise this one,
cut to,
so...
Cut to Denji running around. If I lose that family, I'll just get another one. Anyway, Kimpa's still trying to hide from Himuro, who is trying to find her and kill her. And she thinks, like, what do I do? Because, like, I don't have any means of attacking him, because if I approach, he'll hear me. I'm a stealth type. I'm not suited for one-on-one combat like this. How am I supposed to beat this guy all on my own? But then she sees something strange happening in, like, the mists surrounding her. And it catches her attention. However, because she is, like, cut up on that, she accidentally makes some noise. Himuro shoots his cannon at her and nearly gets her. And in fact, like, I think sticks her. Yeah, he gets her arm, so she is stuck in place now. And Himuro's like, "Oh, I got you now," but she uses her compact and goes invisible again. And Himuro's like, "Okay, sure, but what's the point of being invisible? You're right there, and your revenge ends here." But Kimpa says, "I'm testing a hypothesis. My parents were scientists, remember?" And Himuro's like, okay, shoots his cannon, and it's like, all right, yeah. And then Kimpa starts talking again and says, "You just want to kill another innocent person, huh?" And Kimura's like, "How the fuck did you dodge that? How?" And he looks around and hears like some commotion from another angle and thinks like she somehow got away. And then we cut to a flashback of Kimpa when she was a kid, went to Genji and said, like, teach me how to get revenge. And Genji's like, all right, Himuro, I'll teach you if you're ready. He's a cop, so it'll be a tough fight. You gotta give it all you got, but you can't become a murderer. Now.
But it's okay if they're a cop, because cops aren't people.
Now, that's not what's said, but now, I think that whenever you have the good guy wants revenge story, if there's a whole thing of like, but you can't kill them, it is very context based on if that's a good story decision to make. But you can't just say that, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you can't just be a murderer, because this is a shonen story. Like,
it's gotta be like, look, you can't be consumed with revenge. But if he happens to show up, then like all bets are off, girl. Like ding ding, like go for it.
So yeah, Yumura's like, how the fuck did you get away from my ice attack and stuff? And she's mocking him, saying like, you've been racking up your crimes in the name of justice until your heart became cold as ice. Oh, she's got all the good lines in this chapter. She's been studying for this moment. And while she is using her compact, beams of light start to appear. And Himura's like, what the fuck's going on? And Kimpa says, but my heart's thawed out now. Ooh, ice, ice,
Whoa.
ice. Someone's been learning from at the fountain of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. So she starts to glow as it like starts to like heat up in the room, and she says, I won't fight for the past anymore. She thinks to herself, I've got Dad and I've got Hibaru, and she remembers like training with Hibaru and, you know, like them going on like, you know,
all the cool adventures they had that we were just told they had.
Definitely saw stuff like this in the past. And, you know, Hibaru's saying like, hey, whoever takes over from my dad has to be strong so they can protect everyone and stuff. And Genji says in the present, she grew up watching someone who's stronger and more passionate than anyone I know, so I don't need to worry about her. Yeah, Hibaru, that really strong guy who lost to the guy she's fighting. So,
No. Sacrificed himself because he knew she could handle it, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
It's different.
And he totally won the fight they had before.
Yep.
So Kipa explains, my hypothesis was I can disappear because my astro controls the refraction of light. And I realized it when I melted the ice. Refracted light turns into heat. Light is energy, and when light gathers, it becomes stronger, like with a magnifying glass. Gather the light and turn it into heat. and she casts her compact Astro again and says, "Blazing Beam Compact!" and shoots a fucking giant laser out at Himuro. And she says, "I'm gonna protect my friends and defeat you." We don't see the final blow get struck for some reason, because like that should just be it. I don't care if there's like, oh, and then someone comes in and gets the final blow. No, she fired a fucking laser at him. Let her win.
She should, but I feel like she is going to melt Hibaru, and Hibaru is going to punch him, and that's going to be the final blow. Look, if this is all we get, this is fine, I guess. Like, it is a little amusing that they're like, how does the character whose power is invisibility learn to fight? And they're like, exactly like the last one in Shonen Jump. That was like maybe 2 years ago. Like, I'm really surprised an editor was like, oh, maybe we should wait a couple years before you have this development.
All right, did Hagakure ever fire a laser? All right, you got me there.
Yeah, she did, didn't she?
She used it for like blinding flashes.
Yeah, I guess. I don't think she did like a heat laser beam, but I do think she reflected what's his name's laser beam.
Aoyama, she redirected it. Yes.
Yeah. So that's not great. Two, I gotta be honest, I've never really commented on it, but this chapter rather really made how stupid Kinpa's outfit is to me. Like, the end of the chapter, a lot of people joked, it's like, oh, she's shooting like boob lasers. It's like, guys, she happens to have a large chest. Like, I would have, again, in editing, you would have been like, hey, maybe make like the beam larger so it doesn't look like it's coming just from there or whatever. But also, it's one of those things where like, why am I seeing her midriff so, like, did she like go to school, but then she's like, do I go to the uniform store or the sexy uniform store? Like why is this like such a weirdly sexualized outfit? That part I don't care for whatsoever. And
I just wish she would dress like a Yakuza like the others do.
Yeah, honestly, like, the girl's cool. Give her a fucking pinstripe jacket. Like, she could look pretty dope. But beyond that, it's just kind of whatever. Like, it's a chapter about Kinpa that's mostly about a bunch of dudes talking about Kinpa, which is like, I guess it's better than like the other way around, but it is still just like, I wish I could have just sat with Kinpa and seen her thought process as she went through everything and had like a desperate attack, as opposed to being like, what does her dad think? Like, I don't give a shit. I didn't even remember that was her dad. I thought this was a new character they introduced at the start of the chapter.
I do hope that this fight has a good conclusion after all of this. And I will say, I do appreciate that we did finally have a character whose whole thing is not just punching stuff, because her thing is shooting lasers.
There you go.
So there's a little tally in the good column for me. But let's go on to Hima-Ten, chapter number 19. The school camping trip starts with all of our heroines in the color page at the beginning. Yay. Yeah, so just as is said, it's the beginning of the school camping trip, and we begin basically at the moment that we left off at, with Iemori and Kanai, encountering each other, going into it, and we're reminded, like, right, they're the action committee too, so they've got, like, duties and stuff, but Iemori is just thinking about, like, she thought I looked stylish, I got a compliment, that's great, maybe we can, get closer and stuff. Imari comes by, says, hey, things look like they're going well between you two. So I'm gonna enjoy this camping trip. You do your best too. Gives it just like, hey, good wingman thing.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna stay out of your way. I'm gonna enjoy myself. Good luck. So good for her. She also brought a selfie stick, which feels archaic to me. But
I will say this: they do, from my understanding, still use them. But it does feel ancient. This does feel like a gimmick piece of technology from a decade ago.
Mm-hmm. But on top of that, she has a new Hima Riz product that she's giving out like free samples to all the girls for. She says it's Lucky Love Lipstick. The theme is rooting for your romance. I've heard couples get together during camping trips. And she's like, people are like really excited over and stuff, and so she's like, it's a good chance to gather some data. see, you know, like how this affects people. And she makes sure to give one to Honoka as well. So they're like, whoa, we should like wear them around our crushes and stuff. Ooh. And then they point out like, hey, Himari, why aren't you wearing any? And she says, no, I don't have a crush. She's like a little bit like, I don't have a crush, you know. She feels like she's missing out, kind of thing. So you can tell she's actually being sincere, because she doesn't realize that she's starting to get one on Iamori. As it turns out, because they're on the action committee, Iamori and Honoka are sitting next to each other, and like the seat is like pretty tight in terms of like if you're sitting next to someone, there is very little distance between it. It's like there's the armrest and that's it. And so Iamori is getting a little bit flustered over it. And he's like, oh my God, are we going to have to sit this way for the entire bus trip to camp? Then they also look outside and see that Kanoe is in the bus next to them. And she like has snapped a picture of the two of them hanging out through the window. And she sends it over to Honoka, which is very cute because she gets kind of embarrassed over it. We see that there was like a conversation between the two of them ahead of time. I can only point out, like, hey, you gotta like take advantage of this opportunity. You gotta get in because, you know, Iamori's getting in close with that Kana girl. You know, the one with the big gazongas.
Yeah.
So she points out, like, hey, this is a chance. Go get in on it, you know. And she says, like, you can't just stand back and just do what you always do. Be aggressive, essentially. But before we get into any of that kind of thing, there are two students who kind of like planned recreation for the trip because this is a big thing, you know, in Japanese classes is like you give them shit to do, and give them responsibility. The thing that they have planned is a bingo competition, and so they say like, yeah, you guys are going to play pairs bingo with the person you're sitting next to, and if you win, you get to go to the most popular spot at camp, the stargazing platform, which we wanted to like include on the schedule, but we couldn't like fit it in. And so it's a big popular thing. Iamori is like really excited over it. He's like, I love that kind of thing. And he's like, and if I get to get this, I would be able to go with Honoka. That'd be great. So, but they say there's also a punishment for the last place team, which is doing bus karaoke and doing a love song as a duet. And so, oh no, embarrassment ahoy if you do that.
I would throw myself out the window.
I would steal everyone's bingo card and sabotage them.
I would learn. I was like, I don't believe I would be the strongest person on the bus, but the adrenaline that I would feel would kick me into the highest gear to be the strongest person on the bus.
But they also established that they're going to essentially give a compensation prize to the losing couple, which is you also get to go to the observation deck. So, but it's just you have to suffer horrible embarrassment instead. There are some cute moments because, you know, like as they're playing the game, Honoka gets excited when they like, you know, get stuff, and Iamori is just like more focused on her expressions than when they're playing. The winner is declared, and we fortunately do not spend a lot of time on this. It's just established Honoka and Iamori lose. So they get to go to the stargazing platform later, but they gotta do an embarrassing romantic duet karaoke first. And so Honoka starts singing, and she is horribly tone deaf, which is shocking to a few of the people. But it's one of those things where it's like, isn't it charming how she has, you know, like an awkward imperfection thing? Like Iamori is like, oh, she's tone deaf. So, yeah,
it's adorable.
Afterwards, they get off the bus, and Honoka is so embarrassed that she like, you know, just runs away. She's like, I have to not be here. She meets up with Kanoe, who is like, oh my God, you had to sing karaoke? Your poor classmates. It's very funny. But she also gives her a hug and says, like, you get to go and use the observation deck. It's a big chance, a big opportunity, yeah. And then they say, like, huh, where is Iamori? He's not, like, with the crowd that's, like, gathered outside the bus. So she goes onto the bus and sees that he is cleaning stuff up. And he's like, oh, yeah, we're part of the action committee and all, so I want to make sure that, you know, like, I can pick up the trash, that no one forgot anything or anything like that. And Honoka feels bad because she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I rushed out and just like left you to do all this. But he says, hey, look, I know that you were really embarrassed, but I know you wanted to go to the observation deck. So, hey, thanks for doing that really embarrassing thing for you. But she says, I didn't do it because I wanted to go to the observation deck. I say because I want to go to the observation deck too? Or as it said, oh, he says, you did because I wanted to go to the observation deck. She says, oh, no, I didn't do that for that. I sang because I wanted to go too. Oh, you chickened out. You could have said it, Hanoka. But they're looking forward to it now. And so there's that. And then the note we leave off on is Himari realizes, oh, I had one extra free sample that, because, you know, I just gave one to everyone and I was left with one. And then Hanoka is with Himori walking around right now, and she pulls out the lucky lipstick too. And so it's a pretty typical like love triangle setup of like, hey, there's these two girls and this one guy, and there's just this symbol of like potential bond that could happen here.
Yeah.
A lot of pretty standard stuff, a lot of cute little moments.
Yeah, it was cute. It was fine. I think next chapter will be more interesting.
Ichi the Witch! 11th Hunt Witches Conference. Guys! We found out what color her hair is. It's so green.
I didn't expect it to be like laser lime green.
I love it.
I like it. I just didn't expect it.
The hunt for the the ice shark magic. I can't remember.
The Hajime. No. Hold on.
So
I'm gonna figure it out.
It was successful. So there's a conference to discuss it after the fact. Shirabadona is the one who is, of course, you know, like leading the whole thing because he's the analytic witch. And there's a very funny, quick joke where she has, you know, a report from Kumugi, but there is a brochure / manga / cover document that Descarus has prepared, which is just her on top of the page. It says, Descarus Big Adventure! Battle versus Hisame. There it is.
Yeah, there you go. I was pretty close with Hajime, actually.
Just like, and so Shirabadona just like throws it away. And like, anyway, according to the report my student Kabuki provided, and Descarus is like in a mirror floating around during this whole session, and she keeps on getting up into these little shenanigans that I find so funny. Because, like, you know, Shirabadona is, like, going over the whole thing and saying how well things went, and Descarus's mirror goes over to where it fell over, and she picks up the document that Shirabadona threw away. I love it. But they basically say that Ichi, you know, has gotten freaking 3 different magics in 2 weeks, when sometimes it takes multiple years for magic hunts to work to yield success, which means he is working abnormally fast, and he's got all these fresh approaches to things. And they say he does have Descarus as a tutor, but these are spectacular results for a new witch. And also, the villagers were really, really thankful towards him. They really liked him, which means that the public at large can accept a male witch. So I propose we stop keeping his existence a secret and just officially announce it, which, you know, a bunch of people...
It's kind of fucked up that this world was ready for a male witch sooner than they were for a female president. It's just kind of fucked.
So a bunch of people are like, are you sure about this? But she says, I call it the might as well make an official announcement because finding excuses after he's outed would suck plan. To it, I was just like, this girl gets it. Like, Shirabadona's like got a... It's just a nice practical mind in her head. Also, Descarus likes this plan. She's going woot in the background. I like it. And she says, like, she just points out, like, we're dealing with like a lot of weird questions right now. We might as well just get ahead of it. Monogold, who is kind of seems like the one who is presiding over everything. She is the Aureate Witch, and she has been kind of like Descarus's boss to this point. She says, we don't know everything yet, we don't know all the details, but we're going to present a report on this in time. And then we briefly check in with Circos, Monogold's secretary. And because she says, like, yeah, we've been like relying on Monogold to just like push everyone's mind away from questions and stuff. We're just kind of like, we're looking into it, and everyone's just like, it's fine. And she says, I too am being worked to death. Please help. I want a vacation. It's completely stoic while saying it. But they're just like saying, like, look, it's very like, we should just do it, shouldn't we? And a whole bunch of people are like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's do it. And you can also see their personalities literally shining through the mirrors, which is great. Like, you only see the mirrors, but everyone has very different reactions, and there's like emotional things over and stuff. And Shirabadona's like, okay, sounds like we've got like, yeah, general opinion in favor. And then a hand sticks out of one of the mirrors with a
ice
wand?
pick? I think it's an ice pick.
Ice pick.
Something.
Oh yeah, it's an ice pick wand basically, and casts a spell, River of Ice Nord, and a new witch comes bursting out of the mirror, the Silver Snow Witch, Chikutoge Togiese. I'm gonna have difficulty on that one.
Yeah, this is a character who I saw come up, and I'm like, I'm glad I don't have to figure this one out, because this would have been Toga Chick or something like, this would have been Black Clover all over again. I'm like, Toga Kiss shows up, and she's like, brrr.
And she like casts like a freaking Iceman fountain out and goes and bursts out and says, I oppose. And everyone goes, oh, Togiise, we're over here. Because she like made her dramatic entrance like at the wrong side of the hallway with her back turned to them and stuff. So no one can be just completely cool. Everyone's a little bit goofy.
Yeah.
And she basically just, lays out like this. No, like there was one village that approves of him, but it was isolated. He lacks training. He lacks education in magical theory. And I only approved of his statement because I have faith in your discerning eye, Shirabadona. I don't have faith in him as a person. The fact that he is accompanied by somebody as sloppy and irresponsible as Descaros is enough to make me anxious. And the two of them, of course, Descaros is like, oh, really? And the two of them start butting heads, disagreeing over how they're supposed to deal with Ichi. Togiese says that he needs formal education, proper training so he knows how to behave. And Descaros is like, no, that's a waste of time. He just needs someone to treat him like a dog and say, go get it, boy, and he'll do it. Like, no, like, high opinion of Ichi or all whatsoever. She's like, no, this is the best way to make use of his abilities. And Togiise presents a horrifying vision of how she'll have Ichi if she's allowed to instruct him, which is to make him like her, which is horrifying looking. And Descaros is like, that's creepy. No. And they just are not like, they're just contradicting each other and not getting anywhere. So Shirabadona butts in and says, let's have a contest to decide this. Mm-hmm. It'll be in the next magic hunt. If Togiise can acquire the magic first, we'll say he needs more training. We'll enroll him into an educational program. If Ichi acquires the magic first, we'll acknowledge his abilities. We'll announce his existence to the world. And then she just says, let's do that, okay? Okay. We're doing that now. And both Descaros and Togiise are like, wait, what? So sometimes, just like Descaros said, the way to handle people is just to direct them and overwhelm them with stuff. Ichi, meanwhile, is just hanging out with Kamugi, cooking food. And while this is going on, Uboro makes a suggestion, and he smacks him. And then we see the upcoming magic, a little mushroom fella, who goes, ooh-doo-doo, the woods sure have been noisy lately. Oh, well, those witches will just go for the human hater magics, which is not my problem. I'm not causing anybody any bother at all. Pan back, he's on a bunch of massive mushrooms that are overwhelming the forest that he's inconveniencing everyone. And so, yeah, this is going to be a big contest between Togiise and Ichi. We see them squaring off, and I love how much taller Togiise is, just looking down at him, as she should. And also, she's got like a team of people with her who all look as much like her as possible. I like that that's a theme for her. Like, everyone needs to look like me.
She's like, you all better fucking wear glasses and wear the same hat. I really appreciate that this series went from sharks to mushrooms. Really just running down the top tier list of like sub themes Quinn digs in a series, like ways to like themes to base a character around to make Quinn like them. Sharks, mushrooms, pretty high on both lists. I'm not gonna lie.
But not high on mushrooms. So
I don't want to fuck with something psychedelic, Nick. That's scary to me.
Quinn, there's a new manga in town.
Oh, is there?
From the creator of We Never Learn, Taishi Tsutsui.
I do believe I'm aware of that name.
Sid Craft, Love is a Mystery. Yeah. Case 1, A Great Detective's Fate. I cannot go through this chapter in detail. We don't have time. It is 60 pages long. I can give you the Cliff Notes version. There is a detective. He solves crimes. His name is Sid. He is very good at it. He is unfairly good at it. There is an inspector fulfilling like the kind of Zenigata role. Not Zenigata, the gumshoe role from Ace Attorney. Yes. Like, that's the closest thing that I can say. Her name is Souffle Flambery, which I love. I do love that.
Quite the fucking name, yeah.
And she is mostly just there to just be like, man, you sure are smart.
She really is. They're like, damn, you're a great detective. The rest of us are kind of dumb. I thought we'd do it, but we needed you again.
But Sid Craft gets back home. He's greeted by his assistant, Elio. Well, no, Elio's not actually there. My mistake. And then we find out that Sid, although he presents himself as a debonair, very suave, cool detective guy, man, he's just hopeless. He just loves girls. He had a crush on the girl that he had to out as the killer. And he's like, oh, damn it. And if only I weren't such a great detective, because I just am compelled to solve them. And it ruined my chance at romance. I mean, she was a killer, so...
Yeah, not for nothing. Maybe, she had some flaws that you should be grateful you didn't run into.
There's a brief look into his past where essentially he had eccentric mystery-solving parents who love solving cases, and they warned him, you're a great detective, and great detectives are always fated to attract cases. Like the Murder, She Wrote clause. Like, stuff just happens around you if you're great at solving mysteries. So... all this stuff has happened to him. Like, we established, like, his first love, had to move away because her parents were murdered by robbers. My best friend joined the family drug trafficking business. And the tutor I respected ended up being a serial killer who induced mass panic. Interesting. Want to know about her, actually.
I was going to say, that one's a pretty wild one. Can we get more detail on them?
And he says, I don't even like mystery novels. I like books filled with passion and thrills. Romance novels. Okay.
All right, go for it.
Bursting in at that point is his assistant, Elio Evelyn. Like their design. I like their outfit. They're like Oliver Twist looking almost. Yeah, so Sid always, for whatever reason, tries to put on a suave act around everyone who respects him as a detective. He just can't not do it. I don't know. So then they go to the pub after that. And Elio's like, yeah, this is my go-to pub. And Elio's really popular there and stuff. And then we're introduced to the proprietor of the pub, the killer for the chapter. I'm sorry, did I spoil something? It's only the most obvious twist in the world.
I was going to say, this is a chapter with a mystery, and there's 4 characters in it. 3 of them are on the cover. I kind of was able to guess who was going to be the killer.
Also, he was bemoaning the fact that he always outs the beautiful women as killers, and, she's a beautiful woman that he is immediately smitten with. We also established that, Elio's really popular. Everyone thinks that they're really cute. Everyone knows their name. And there's all these pictures where Elio's, the center of attention and stuff that are posted on the wall. So Elio's a super cool person. Yeah. I kept on going through this being like, is Elio feminine? Is that just a feminine guy?
I saw the art a lot, and I was like, oh, it's going to be the detective guy and 2 girls. I get it. I read We Never Learn, and then saw Elio.
Sid kept on saying, male pronouns for Elio.
I was like, oh, okay. And
this might be interesting, just have, a feminine guy be part of this, romantic comedy series. Sure. Yeah. No. So, tension happens between Sid and the bar patron and stuff. He keeps on falling for her. Elio's also there and keeps on misinterpreting stuff moments of Sid's awkwardness for him being a great detective and everything. He keeps on doing things where he's unnecessarily suave and stuff. Then Souffle Granberry shows up and she says, "Hey, Sid Kraft, I needed you to come and help solve a case because I am the chief inspector who don't know how to do their job, just like every mystery solving guy's thing." So drags him out, which upsets Sid because he's got to solve a crime and he gets dragged away from the beautiful woman. They go out into the woods where a man's corpse is, and they observe, like, yeah, he was gripping the gun in his hand, bullet in his chest was fired from it, certainly, but for like 10 meters from the entrance of the forest to the scene of the crime, there's just one set of footprints going the whole way, and they match the shoes found on the body, and they're like, what weird platforms on these shoes? And immediately, Quinn, when I saw this, I was like, the footprints were to match the woman's feet because he was going to try and kill her and she killed him instead, and it is the bartender. And I immediately was like, look, these are just very, very simple clues that are laid out for you. So
Nick's like, I've watched a Sherlock thing before.
I've watched a mystery series before. Yeah. Like, Sid does some stuff where he finds some other clues and everything, and it's like, yeah, so these were to imitate someone smaller than him. And then Elio and Souffle are both like, oh my goodness, wow, but why did the victim do that? And so it's like, yeah, Sid's like, oh, it's a trick that, like, you know, like animals do sometimes in order to avoid making more footprints and stuff. And so Souffle shouts to the cops, like, okay, guys, look up shoes that match these, see if a shoe store has sold them to someone recently. And then Sid's like walks off all cool, and then it's like, oh, I'm at my limit, because he's socially awkward and stuff. Leaves. He's like, I hate corpses and blood. It's my curse as a detective. Goes, and then he remembers, oh, he made a childhood promise with a girl, a blonde girl, like Souffle is blonde, and who called him Sai. And was like, hey, Sai, let's one day become world-renowned great detectives, and then we'll see each other again, because she was being taken away. And he was like, oh, I can't even remember the name or face of my first love. But you remember that very specific thing she told you. Anyway, so then he is approached by Ms. Limery, the pub owner, who wants to check in on him and stuff. Is like, oh my God, it's fate. I will escort you back to your domicile. And he's like, oh, that was cringe. And then she's like, oh yeah, I'd feel so much safer that way. And he's like, oh my God, this is great. This is wonderful. And then she says like, oh, and yeah, I'm single right now because I broke up with the guy recently. And then, of course, it turns out, because they have like some Doki Doki moments, and then you realize it's right when it looks like they're getting really close. Yeah, you murdered the guy, didn't you? And yeah, I can tell because, like, you know, there were some very obvious like contradictions in what you're telling me versus who I know. We see that there were some visual clues, like those photos that Elliot was the center of attention in. Oh, it turns out the guy was like a bartender at her pub, and they had matching necklaces and stuff. And so there are also things about how she was wearing boots before and everything. And so he tried to write it off in his mind, but then she contradicted himself, told him very obvious lies, and she was like, okay, obviously she killed him. And we get a little chibi version of how things played out, which was, for whatever reason, when they broke up, the guy wanted to kill her, and then she turned the tables on him because she was only shot in the arm. She's had a bandage on it this whole time. And then she was like, oh, and then I'll just like use the trick that he was going to use, where he, you know, followed me, stepped on my footprints, and I'll backtrack instead to hide it. Feel like she could have probably gotten away with, you know, claiming self-defense, but oh well.
Fair.
So Sid got her dead to rights, so she reveals herself, and also reveals that the only reason she was getting close to him was because she wanted to see if there was any suspicion on her, and so he's upset about that too. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Afterwards, we get the aftermath, where Souffle comes to Sid's agency and says, like, yeah, so we did some work afterwards, determined that, yes, there was a bullet in her arm that she'd been covering up that matched the gun, so we absolutely got her, yes. Elliot is super impressed about everything. Sid tries to, you know, say something really cool, but he's just heartbroken and stuff. Souffle leaves, boop-a-doo, and then, as Elio is picking up some paperwork, oh my gosh, their hat flies off, and they've got long hair.
Whoa! Like a girl?
Because they're a girl. Oh, because effeminate-looking men never have long hair. So, but she says, that was a close call. I have to pass off as a guy in front of Master no matter what. Why? Well, that is the question, I guess. Anyway, we then follow Souffle, who thinks to herself, man, I couldn't solve the case before Sid again. I didn't do a cool, awesome detective thing. I can't fulfill the promise to one day become great detectives like my childhood friend, Sai, whose name is definitely not
Sid.
Side. Look, Quinn, we didn't like We Never Learn all the way at the very beginning. But I'm kind of not very impressed at all with this.
Okay, so we don't have like a ton of time for me to really get into too many thoughts. What I'll simply say is I don't have like as much. I understand this is like the first chapter for a mystery series, so like I don't have high expectations that the mystery is gonna like blow my mind. Be like I've never seen anything like this. Like it's setting up other characters. It just needs to serve a point. I think more so it was the tone that's like I'm a mystery series, but I don't like to solve mystery. I just want to read romance, and I'm like, I don't know if I buy into this yet. Like, I don't think this is gonna fix that detective void that Jump just can't seem to get like a hit out of.
Yeah, and I don't even know if the point is going to be like mysteries. It might just be like mystery flavoring to a romantic comedy story, which could be fine. I more have a problem with Sid, the character himself, who just seems like a whiny bitch.
Fair.
Like the thing that kind of like was hit on with We Never Learn was that Yuiga was, a nice protagonist to follow because he had struggles and desires that he worked hard to obtain, and everything literally falls into Sid's lap in terms of his professional success. And it was like, but he has no romantic success. It's like, yes, but in the previous series, the romance wasn't what they were trying to get. It's just something that happened to them. And in this, it's like, well, he's going to be trying to get romance then, but then also he's going to be having these at least two love interests, presumably. So it's just complicated. And I don't understand why one the she can't put together that she promised to be world-renowned detectives with a kid named Sai, and she's working with a world-renowned detective named Sai.
Nick, come on! They make these mangas that like 8-year-olds can consume them. Like sometimes we have to accept we have aged out of the target demographic that they're trying to like entertain.
All right, Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, Chapter 21, Kiyoshi and the Great Demon Lord. Yeah, so the Demon Lord's been summoned. Things are going to shit all over the place. We do cut around to a few different people who are like reacting to like, oh my god, there's a Demon Lord out there. And Mr. Sakaki, of course, is facing down Yuta, whose arm he has cut off, and he says like, "Oh my God, you summoned the Great Demon Lord. How many people have you sacrificed for this?" And Yuta grows his arm back with demon powers and stuff, and jumps away. And he says, "All this peace has made humanity soft. Drastic measures were necessary. By learning demons exist, all these corrupt people will be given a chance to turn over a new leaf. Fear makes people stronger." And Sakaki goes after him, tries to stop him, and he says, look, in 3 minutes, the Great Demon Lord may even lay Kiyoshi Harai to rest. To make sure he's got no distractions, I just got to hold you up here. But Sakaki counters his attack before he can launch it, and he says, you think he needs my help? Kiyoshi Harai is the ultimate exorcist. Boo! Kiyoshi launches another attack at the Demon Lord, who slashes it in half. And he says, "That's not going to work on me again." And sure enough, Kiyoshi keeps on trying a whole bunch of different techniques that he used in that long string of attacks before. He tries to do his Hekanokiri's punch again, and this time it gets blocked. He summons an Athena shield, and it gets broken through. Just nothing is working at this point. But he says, the Demon Lord says, "You're still not broken. This is much more fun than you just said it would be. I suppose it's only natural, though. After all, you did survive Rushihara." And Kiyoshi flashes back to the death of his parents when they were killed by a devil. And the Demon King says, "You lose your will to fight after just hearing its name? You truly are a child. Once it's implanted its roots, it takes root deeply. the fear carved into you grows and will stay with you the rest of your life. I'm going to destroy everything here, including you. Titanomachy! Big, huge, ball of dark energy in the sky. And he says, this was fun. And he's going to just, wreck everything. Cast a huge amount of dark magic over the entire city and kill everyone. Kiyoshi is frozen in shock over the recollection of his parents' death, looking up at it hopelessly, and he realizes, like, everyone's going to die. And we cut again to all of his friends as they're, looking up in the sky at everything. But then he remembers Mr. Yamada telling him the first chapter, deep breaths. And so Kiyoshi thinks, I'm being an idiot. He takes a deep breath, gets determined again, starts to unleash power, and declares Ultra Pandora, and summons a big old bubble of energy around the gathering dark energy and just snuffs it out when it explodes, basically. He contains the blast. And the Demon King goes, you shrunk it down to minimize the fun. Oh, no! As he gets punched in the ribs. And Kiyoshi is even faster and stronger than he was before. Kiyoshi knocks him into a tree, and he says, you're right that the fear is never going away, but that fear isn't the only thing that will go away. And he thinks, Mr. Yamada taught me that. It's inside me, still running through my veins. What I fear more than a demon is losing the people who are important to me. And he goes, bring it! I'm going to exercise the hell out of you.
Whoa.
Nice.
Sure. Seems fine.
Simple. But
seems like it's ending.
Yeah, shush. But yes. I liked it, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Marriagetoxin, chapter 108. Hey! So Gero and Arashiyama showed up in order to save Himikawa. They arrived in dangerous to Kurizaka's special room that only I should know about. I mean, presumably the people who... The architect... Never mind. So...
this also seems to imply that he built the bondage easel then. Like, he didn't get that custom made because then they would have to know where this room was to deliver it.
Nobody can know about this room. I'm sure this is the way. I understand. Never mind. So he demands to know how the hell they got in here. And Gero says, like, well, we've got the hamster user on our side. And he says, like, yeah, she's the most capable expert in infiltration out there. And Arashiyama, for whatever reason, like, she just completely, like, doesn't recognize that he is complimenting her. And then when Himikawa, like, says, like, yeah, he was complimenting you, she's like, yeah! Fuck you, guy! I've already made direct contact with the mice at this museum and negotiated the details out of them. So the great intricacies of rodent politics have come to bite Takurazaka in the ass. So he smirks and goes, fine, y'all win. I'll stop asking you to be my dangerous girl. You can even have the solid gold crew cut bust as well. I won't stop you. He even takes it out of, like, another room, pushes it over to them. But make no mistake, I'll keep on taking as I always have. If I take something and you take it back, all I gotta do is take it once again. That is how stealing works, yes.
Yeah, it's like he has a grandiose way to basically be like, I'm just gonna keep stealing everything you steal back.
So, yeah, he's like, he says, you've dedicated yourself to stealing this back. It's meaningless that you've done so. But Gero says, like, no, it's not. He says, you probably should have actually realized this yourself. Which is that you suck, basically.
Yeah, basically, he's like, have you ever considered you're a fucking whiny bitch boy loser, actually?
He essentially says, like, look, Himikawa does all this. She doesn't ask for anything in return. She makes all these great memories for people. She helps them out. No one ever asked her to do this. She's never asked for anything in return. And not anyone can just do that. And isn't that side of her what drew you to her as well? And... this is a very cool moment because it's like all the memories he has of Himikawa and how special a person she is, basically, flash behind him. And Himikawa looks at him like, oh, wow, when he does this. So this clearly affects Takarazuka in some way, but he starts to walk off, and Himikawa says, hey, hold on. Would you like to come and return the treasure with me? And he is, of course, flabbergasted by this. And she says, right now, I see a man filled with guilt and pain for what he has done. Sure, not everyone will forgive you, but if you apologize, then maybe you can find forgiveness in at least one person. And I love that moment because she doesn't like sugarcoat it and say like, "Oh, it'll all be great," but she's like, "It is worth it if one person forgives you if you sincerely apologize for this," basically. And it clearly does get to him. He starts to tremble, but then, of course, he just gets angry and he spins around and says, "How dare you! How dare you! I'm the king of plunder!" And he lunges forward and he attacks her with his electric whip. And Himikawa flinches, but Garo catches her attention and tosses her let's call it the 3-segmented shark, I guess, because it's just her thing. It's her shark weapon thing.
Yes, she has her shark club, her segmented 3D printed shark sword.
And I do love this because it's like, hey, we came and rescued Himikawa. He doesn't jump in and be like, "Oh, I'll fight this guy now." It's like, you can take this guy. Gives her a weapon, and she does it. Like, she dodges the whip, gets in, and realizes like he is like completely different from when we fought before. He's overwhelmed by all these like insecurities. He's lost control of himself, and I can just read him and get through his defenses. And as Takarazuka panics, he flashes back to his actual sympathetic backstory, where he admits like, when I first started treasure hunting, I didn't care about treasure. I just wanted to go on adventures with my friends. We just happened to come across treasure. And then I spruced up the story, became a best-selling writer, and then all the expectations on me were that I would keep on doing it. And so then there was the pressure on him, and so he faked it. He buried these treasures that he'd actually stolen from people and then quote-unquote found them. And he realizes, all this time, I may have been searching for somebody who would right all the wrongs I've made. And this is what that feels like. A plastic shark knocking my teeth out, I guess.
Ow!
Fun chapter. I like that Himikawa gets this chance to stand up for herself. She gets to make the cool speech to reach out to the bad guy, and she gets to kick his ass afterwards. And where's that doll? Where's that creepy fucking doll? Where is it?
Yeah, I'm guessing that's going to be a connecting point in the rest of these stories that we get with the girls. But who gives a shit? Himikawa got to look super cool, and she beat up the big loser dude.
Absolutely. Quinn, new Exorcist.
Me.
Chapter.
Oh, yeah. God. Can't we skip it? Nick, it's a shitty form. Like, it doesn't even look different.
Chapter 75, Gakuro's strength. And oh no, he's been injured. Fujino's like, I can't even summon Kyokatsu here. Oh no. Rito says, this is the result of my training, Gakuro. You worked hard to come up with ways to compensate for your lack of combat power, but even so, your blade will never reach my throat. So he's like, rest easy and die. And then, poosh, an explosion goes off, and we get a flashback where we learn more combat terms from new Exorcist. There's these things that are command energy and circuits and stuff, and there's a lot of shots of Nue's boobs. So it's very important that you see her boobs in all these shots as she is explaining how circuits work. I skipped all these pages. I didn't read any of them. I didn't read them.
This could not have been a worse way to explain the concept they're trying to get through to you. I really sat through it and dissected. I was like, I understand what you're trying to say. This is the worst way to convey this information, though.
Anyway, all that happens, and then it turns out that Gakuro was doing more training on the side while this was happening. So he's actually stronger than Rito thinks because he did more training. So he starts to do this, and then there was lasers and stuff, and then a laser went off, and then he blocked it with the laser, and then did more training. And now in the present, he blocks Rito's attack after spinning around from behind, because Rito, you made one critical error. You got behind Gakuro to attack him. You shouldn't have done that. That's where people's defense is the highest, you fool!
Yeah, you fool!
Gakuro says, my heart's caught up! I'll change here and now! I'm the captain of the 6th branch of the Exorcist Bureau's Elimination Squad, Gakuro Yajima! I'm through hesitating! I'm going to cut you!
Ah!
And Rito's like, what the fuck, just die. And then Gakuro cuts him. And just blah! And then we cut to Nue being there at the beginning where Gakuro got the new form change. I guess, and said, let's name it. The new power needs a name. A power you create by thinking of your companions and pledging to fight with conviction. When I think of fighting with conviction and protecting my companions, do I think of, Quinn? Massacre gear. That's
Yeah.
massacre gear.
That's a great word to describe the feeling you're getting into. A massacre.
Oh man, giving Gakuro an ability called Massacre Gear. It's like giving Barney an AK-47 and saying he's badass now, right?
It's so ridiculous because it's supposed to be a big moment, but it's like such a shitty panel that I'm like, is anything changed about him, or is it just that stupid thing by his eye leaves a trail now? Because that doesn't, like, this is all nonsense. Everything you're doing is nonsense.
All right, so back to reality for New Exorcist. It was bound to happen. Yeah. Akane-banashi! Chapter 135, Apprenticing! Urara is continuing to tell Akane the story of Shigema and Isho meeting Kiroku Kashiwaya. And she says, like, yeah, after they saw him do Time Soba, the story he was beginning in the last chapter, yeah, Shigema said he forgot about the pain of being beaten up because it was so enrapturing. Basically.
They were like, this dude's performance was so good. We were like, we're not going to be hoodlums anymore. We're going to be respectable Rakugaga.
Pretty much. They immediately
he said the word right, though.
Right. They immediately went to him and were like, hey, can we be your apprentices? And he was like, ha, no, go away. So he does say, like, look, I recognize that you guys have got spirit, but no, forget about it. So Isho takes the additional step of getting down on his hands and knees to say, look, I am begging you. Shigema follows after. And so that convinces him to at least, like, hear them out. He says, like, look, are you sure this is what you want to do? But he does think about how he's like, I guess I did, like, drag you guys out to my show to see me, so I'll think about it. But he says, think hard about the life you want to lead. So he leaves him there, and then Shigema and Isho are pissed off about this. Shigema especially, because he's like, oh my god, what's his problem? More like, P. Roku Kashiwaya. Got him. Good job, kid. So then Isho catches his attention and point out, like, oh, that's that Yakuza who beat us up. And Shigema wants to, like, get the hell away from him, but Isho goes right up to him instead and says, why'd you call him Captain Rakugo? And the Yakuza says, like, get the fuck out of here. And Isho says, look, and he bows respectfully and says, please tell us about it. So the Yakuza says that he met Kiroku Kashiwaya during the war. And he says, yeah, we were drafted, they sent us into battle, and it was horrible because it was war. And he, says, like, I was like, I didn't want to see anything happening around me because there was all this death. But in the midst of pure hell, the captain's Rakugo was the one thing I heard, plain and clear. Because it turns out, Kashiwaya was just a captain in the military. And he kept his troop spirits up by performing Rakugo for them. And he says, I went to him one time and asked, how can you remain calm like this? And he said, Rakugo is about describing the nature of humanity. Laugh when you're happy, cry when you're sad. If a Rakugoka gives up his humanity, he's got nothing left. So, he kept them grounded by reminding them that they were humans and not like soldiers doomed to die. So he says, like, look, I was moved by that. And I bet that sounds silly to you. But they think about the words and they're like, laugh when you're happy, cry when you're sad. Then they come across Kiyoe at the soba shop, and they remember, the trouble that they caused because the Yakuza came and messed stuff up, and how, that one son took a swing at her. And they're still beaten up because this is still the same day that this all went down. And so both of them bow deeply to Kiyoe, and they say, we are so sorry that we caused you this trouble. Please forgive us. And she's, taken a bit aback by that, and then she's like, yeah, little hooligans. I'm glad you're all right. Come on, come inside. It was very sweet. Then the next day, like, a whole bunch of people are, like, having a soba, and she says, yeah, this always happens after he does a soba story. Like, everyone's completely moved by it, and they all come in. And Kiroku is hanging out at the soba place, having a bowl of soba, as always. And then he's like, I got to do a Rakugo show today, so here's money for my tab. And Kyo even like doesn't want to take it because she's like, you brought me so much business, so that kind of makes up for it. But as he's leaving, he says to the guys, like, I heard you guys apologize to Kyo before. It sounds like you did what I asked of you. So what's next? And that's when he takes them on.
Sure.
And we see, several scenes of them just like in a big montage. They are his live-in apprentices. There's scenes of like, Shiguma practicing Jugemu, which is like a bizarre scene for me because it's like, oh yeah, that's like the really experienced guy doing like baby's first Rakugo, basically. But they come to a point where like they also encounter Urara while she's on her Rakugo training and stuff, and there's them studying and learning all these different tricks of the trade, getting promoted to Futatsume and stuff, or to Zenza rather. And then when it comes time to be their first time actually at an actual show backstage, they come to the guy in charge and like, yeah, I'm not supposed to let you guys have the opening slot, so you guys are not going to get to perform, basically. And in the present, Urara says, that's the end of the Makura of the story. Next is how the feud started. And we are told that the person who decided on this, that Isho and Shiguma would not perform, was Kiroku, and this guy is master, Miroku Kashiwaya. So things getting a little bit different. I do like a lot of this scene in terms of like, hey, emotional connections and how Rakugo is like a really valuable form of art because it helps people remember their fucking humanity. It's cool stuff.
Is that guy there the dude that's the head of the Rakugo Federation or Foundation or whatever?
I
just remember he had weird eyebrows like that guy, and he would be about their age, which was kind of how I was reading that character.
It is him, yes. Okay. He is the chairman of the Rakugo Federation, yes.
Interesting. Curious to see what's going to happen. That seems like this is where that feud starts, so cool stuff happening there. But we have to wrap this up. We have so many things. Yeah. So, Nick, what were your favorite series and MVP of this week?
Ichi the Witch. It's just Ichi the Witch.
Okay.
I can't not love every chapter of this series. It was so fucking good. Like, it's just funny.
I'm very happy that you enjoy it so much. When it comes to series, sometimes you gotta go with a bit of an unconventional one. Didn't think it was gonna be that unconventional at the time, but I really appreciate that when it came down to it, Undead Unluck was ready to pull the trigger and just use Unjustice to... It's actually going to be Blue Box, but I wanted to stop for a moment. I was like, I think I might be able to sell Nick on the idea that I was going to give it a chapter of the week.
Spark this argument all over again. Yeah. For MVP, I think that I am going to go with Taiki, though. I think that's just a really good boyfriend move of, hey, I will fall on this grenade. I will put myself through fucking living with your dad if it means that you can, stress-free keep doing basketball because I know it's affecting you. It's a very nice thing.
I think I'm also, do I double up? Yeah, fuck it, I'll double up. I'm going to also do Taiki. Taiki was cool this week. I was going to give it to Himakawa, but I was like, she didn't really get to say actually all that much in the grand scheme of things. But that was also the chapter I was considering. Actually, no, do Himakawa. I like that shark girl. She deserves more props, so take that, Taiki. You jerk.
Absolutely. Himakawa did have a great chapter, and I liked, Kiyoshi's little thing where he got his groove back, and I actually did like Kinpa in Astro Royale. What she did.
The audience, by the way, agreed with us, Taiki, character of the week. But Sidcraft actually won chapter of the week.
I'm so sorry, guys.
Oh, man. You always know you're in for a good time when it's a series the audience likes, but Nick just doesn't.
I'm sorry. I'm the one who reads the chapters, y'all. I'm going to make you hate this.
Wow.
Just kidding.
I have the next series, but I guess we should do our whole spiel.
Yeah. Guys, thank you very much for listening to Weekly Manga Recap. We do this show Wednesdays around 7:30 Eastern Time here on twitch.tv/RoloT. If you want to know when the stream goes live for our recording, you can join us on our Discord server, which will be linked wherever a recording of this gets posted. We do this on youtube.com/weekly manga recap, where the video version is. We have an opening sequence there by Marriagetoxin and Winsleydale Cheddar, and occasionally a title card by Steve Man, whose artwork you can check out by searching for Steve Man Art. Audio versions of the show are available on weeklymangarecap.podbean.com, as well as on iTunes, Spotify, podcast feeds, places. We also have additional content on Patreon, patreon.com/weeklymangarecap. We've been talking a lot about like Western comic books on there, and we have weird conversations where we have like weird little challenges where we try and come up with stupid ideas related to the manga we talk about. And so if you want additional content, it's on there. If you want to chip in a little bit of money to financially support the show. We also want to thank Ninja X3i, who maintains the Google Doc that we maintain a lot of our information on. If
Uncle Ninja, we should call him, by the way.
Uncle Ninja, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Absolutely. And that is where we keep track of stuff like MVP and favorite series voting, the bonus rewards, which are going to be coming up sooner than you think as we head towards the end of 2024.
Oh, Jesus, my God.
What happened? And also, if you have a series that you want us to cover on the show, you can leave it as a recommendation, or if you see it already on there, add your own vote, such as this one.
Yeah, so I decided for this next one, again, I'm being a little bit careful with what kind of stuff I'm going to jump into right now. So I'm going to go with something that I already know I kind of like because I just started watching the anime of it. So I'm going to take this recommendation from Molderman, Ota, Kiniku Fan, Gilly Elfson, Arjun the King, Grim, Artosh, Call Me Ben, Bass Forever, Loom Ramayasha, Black Gendo, Eerie Gray, Necromus, Ovio, Lucas, N-Pug, Ghostly Platypus, and Knopf 4. We are going to be reading Don to Don.
I kind of knew it was going to be that.
So many people have been asking for it. I've watched the first like 7 episodes, and I'm just going to keep watching them as it happens. But I was like, I think this is something we probably should just read on the show. We kind of held off like, oh, we'll get it in for Halloween month. And it's like, just do it whenever.
It's hot now, too.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that is going to do it. We'll see you next week. Hopefully.
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.